Okie dokie. What's up? What's happening? Happy Thursday to everybody. Happy Thursday. Oh, we had an interesting caller last night. I think it's the same person who called me the other day. But this is the person that said that Dr. Liam O'Mara, was completely wrong. I mean, the guy has a PhD in Middle Eastern Studies and World History. So, I mean, do you think he's going to be wrong about the history of the region? So, what this person did was, I gave them my email the other night, and I said, hey, if you have documents or information that, basically debunks what he's saying or what I say, please send it along. The person sent me these emails saying, you're a moron, you're an idiot, all these personal attacks. That's not evidence against, what we said. So, hey, Rosemary. Basically, the bottom line is, I'm more than happy to entertain, you know how I am, I'm more than happy to entertain any information that will, shape a better view of something if it makes sense, right? But personal attacks, I mean, come on, that's silly. That's like third grade stuff. Anyway, you get a lot of that on Twitter too. Once somebody can't counter whatever's being discussed, they'll start using name calling. Or they'll go to the same old playbook, like, oh, you hate, I get this a lot. Oh, some guy last night, he's like, you just hate Jewish people. You can't stand Jewish people. I'm like, bullshit, What I talk about has nothing, it's about power dynamics and oppressor versus oppressed. It's not about, like I said, I've said this over and over again, I hate to keep repeating it. If the tables were turned and an Arab state had been carved out of historic Palestine, marginalizing Jewish people, and what had happened since then, like from 1967, was more territory, more displacement. And then right now, if the Jewish resistance had dared to fight back against this oppressive Arab government, I wouldn't have liked the tactics in some cases against civilians, but I would understand it in relation to resistance against an occupation or a siege/blockade. So in that case, I would be advocating on behalf of the Jewish population that was oppressed by the Arab nation. It's the same thing. It's, in fact, I think people would be even more outraged because of the historical, understanding and how the Jewish lobby works. That if it was a group of people that were Jewish being oppressed, especially with what happened in World War II, they'd be screaming from the mountaintops across the world, probably more than we're seeing now, right? So anyway, it is what it is. And, I had a friend recently who I went to the pro-Israel protest with, and one of his friends thinks, again, that I'm completely anti-Semitic. And unfortunately, the guy won't speak to me anymore because he kind of agrees with his friend that I just, and I got to tell you, I can understand how people who have this emotional connection to what happened in the Holocaust, as well as the never again concept, and the fact that the state of Israel is a representation of a safety net against never again. I get that. And it's easy probably for somebody to lump somebody in. But I'll take a polygraph 24/7, 365 and affirm the fact that, I care as much about Jewish people as I do about anybody else, whether it's my own family members, anybody else, just anybody. It's like, who the hell cares who somebody is? It's about how people behave, right? It's about care. Like Martin Luther King said this. He says, I look forward to the day when the sons and daughters of former slave owners can sit down with my children and they will treat each other based on the content of their character, not based on the color of their skin. And I would add in ethnicity and religion to that, right? And that's the point, is that, you take people for what they do, right? And if somebody does you wrong, then you're pissed. If somebody does you right, you respect them. Pretty simple stuff, right? I think it's pretty universal. It's the golden rule. People keep asking me if I'm religious or not, or if I believe in God. And what I tell them is I'm confused, right? I don't have any certainty around either position. I was watching Democracy Now! Let me just turn that off for a second here. Okay, I was trading this morning too, finally trying to make some damn money. By the way, I wanted to ask everybody, would it interest the crowd if I ever talk about trading and investing? I know it's a completely different subject than geopolitics, but I think it's something that's very interesting, and I think most people would find it interesting. I mean, there's a lot of different ways to trade, so my way isn't the right way. And oftentimes what you'll learn about trading is, what works for one person doesn't necessarily work for the other, mainly because our brains all function a little differently. But I have a way that I like to do it that I think makes sense, and, I'm still not that good at it, by the way. I understand what to do, but there's a big difference between understanding what to do and actually being able to successfully implement it. It's like if the coach tells you to go do a certain play in basketball, you understand the playbook, but you may not be able to execute it because the defense is really good, meaning the other traders that are out there. Now, I'm about break even. Somebody says, am I making money? I took 3 trades today, all in crude oil. First trade, I lost $30. Second trade, I lost $30. Third trade, I made 60, so I broke even. So, and I know what my problems are. Basically, I just show you really quickly on the crude oil chart here. I'll just show it to you really quickly. So there's the chart for today. And it's been down quite a bit. And right now it's kind of forming what's called a bearish wedge. So I'll do a little line here and show you what I mean. So let me remove these lines. Remove that, remove this. And I'm just going to draw a little line here. You can see what's happening. It's kind of forming this little rising kind of formation like that. And that's bearish. And you can see where it can't get any higher than right about up here, right? So basically you're waiting for one of two things to happen. You're waiting for it to break below this little level here or above this level here. When it's in the middle, it's hard to trade. So you want to see it kind of show its hand. But look what time it is, middle of the day. So there's generally times of the day when you have more liquidity, more active traders. And it makes sense because the European session and the American sessions overlap in the morning. And so you'll get the most people going in and out of the market, which means you have more trading activity, which makes the market move more volatility, which means that you get the better chance for movement. It's like surfing versus on a calm day versus a more active day on the waves, or flying a kite when there's wind out or whatever. And trading is a pretty simple system. It's very much probability driven. And the problem is that emotions get in there because it's money. It's your own money. So the less money you trade with initially, the better it is, because your emotions don't overwhelm you, because it's like, if you lose $5, who cares, right? Now me, I try to play bigger, which I shouldn't do, because, it's like anybody else. You want to make money, right? You have this greed factor, like, oh my gosh, I can. So there's this FOMO and greed, or there's fear of losing money, right? So there's both of these things are against you all the time. And what you have to learn to do is when you're feeling the most uncomfortable, you have to get in. And when you're feeling the most happy, you got to get the hell out, because usually that's exactly the right time to do it. It's amazing how it works. All right, I got to feed the dog. Anyway, I can go over it if you ever want me to talk about it in detail. Maybe I'll schedule a live where I do that. But you really have to understand the basics first, because if you try to skip ahead, which again, a lot of people do, myself included, it hurts you, right? The way I like to talk about trading, like any other professional skill, by the way, let me give you an example. So NBA basketball, right? NBA basketball is an incredibly talented, tall, fast, athletic group of people competing at the highest level, right? I mean, it's really hard to play against people who are 6'8". I'm 5'10", and I'm okay at basketball. I can shoot well, I can dribble, but I couldn't compete against people that are 6'8" and can run faster, jump higher than me, right? And it takes people, even with the right body type and the right athleticism, it takes years to develop your skill set from, 12 years old to 18 through college. And, it's a process of getting better, right? You learn more of the nuance. You tend to move in places where you're better suited. Kind of get a feel for stuff. And then you kind of get in and out of the zone depending upon how you're playing. Trading's exactly the same way. And the way I like to look at it is, we've all seen what a flagpole is. A flagpole is about the size, maybe like 3 or 4 inches wide, a metal flagpole. And we all know what a telephone pole looks like. It's more like a foot wide piece of wood, right? And the way I like to talk about trading is, in terms of one's development, you have to crawl, walk, run, right? So imagine if somebody said the only way for you to get better at trading is for you to increase the size of the telephone pole from 4 inches to 12 inches. And it's got to be done with one coat of paint at a time. So we all know you put paint on, it's got to dry. You got to wait, let it dry, right? So you might be able to get one coat a day, maybe one coat every 2 days. So over time, the more coats you put on, the wider the pole gets. And eventually, over a lot of time, the pole gets big enough that you can function. It's like a tree, right? A tree has to start out with a small number of rings, and over time, every year it gets another ring or something like that. That's trading. And you can't shortcut it. And everybody, including myself, tries to. Everybody. Because it's natural. You want to make the money quicker, right? You're like, well, they say only like 7 to 10% of traders actually are profitable, and only about half of that make decent money. Because it's hard as hell. Trust me. So, having said all that, you have to be willing to submit yourself to a process, which no one wants to take a slow, but it's just like with trying to organize, we've talked about this, to overcome the political structure, you have to go through the hard but necessary steps to organize and create a decentralized movement, have a series of escalatory strategies and tactics with a series of very commonly held desired outcomes, right? It's a process to do that. Nothing different here. So the most important thing in trading is managing your risk, because what kills you is taking very large losses. It depletes your account. So if you lose half your account, you have to make 100% to get it back just to break even. So as long as you lose little, they say the best traders lose the best. Because, and by the way, I've been very good about that. Every time I've had a loss, it's been very small. So, you have to do that. You have to be disciplined and take your trades off if they don't go in your favor. That's the most important thing. But it's all probability. I can go through it sometime. Anyway, bottom line is emotions. The painting on the telephone pole, you understand what to do very quickly once you study it. It's all, very similar type of stuff. But having the emotion, managing one's emotions, it's not changing your emotions, it's understanding your emotions and doing the right thing despite your emotions. That's what I struggle with, because that's the part of painting the pole. And over time, you just recognize things more frequently, and you kind of know from past experiences, okay, I'm feeling this way now, but I know that I felt this way before, so I can kind of ride it out, whatever. That's getting to be good as a trader. And the other thing to do is to document and review your trades so you don't make the same mistakes over and over again. So it's a process. You need to manage your risk, review your trades, stick to one or two setups, which is like a playbook. Don't try to do everything, because being a jack of all trades in the markets is like trying to play forward, center, and guard and coach the team at the same time. It's just too much, right? And Confucius said, as far as watching symbols, you want to start out with just one. We'd like to be able to catch the Tesla move. We want to catch the Microsoft move. We want to be able to catch the no. It dilutes your focus. I can tell you, if I try, again, all the things I'm telling you to do, I've done wrong. I've done more wrong than most. So anyway, we'll schedule that out and talk about that. What I want to do is get my phone pointed at the screen so I can talk through the charts and stuff like that. But there's some very basics from probability we have to talk about first, but we'll cover that later. So I want to see what's on people's minds today. We have somebody in the queue, so let me see. We have Melissa, CPA. Melissa's a CPA. How cool. Yeah, I have a good friend who's a certified public accountant as well. Does a lot of tax returns for a lot of rich people, by the way. And that's where, by the way, if you know something about rich people, they manage their taxes better than anybody, because they're trying to have the least amount of taxes, because that's what leaves you the most money at the end of the year. The richest people in the world, if you don't know how this works, they don't have an income. Like most of us work a job and we have a paycheck, and then we have certain things deducted from the paycheck, federal taxes, state taxes, FICA, which is Social Security, Medicare, whatever it is. So those all come out involuntarily. Like we just get the net of that. Well, rich people don't have that. I see your request. I'll get you on in a second here. I usually go 15, 20 minutes and then I bring on guests. So sorry if you're waiting. That's just how I do it usually. So here's what they do. It's smart, by the way. So they have assets like real estate, stocks, bonds, like a portfolio of assets. So what they do is they go to a bank and they say, hey, I have this asset which I will pledge you as collateral. That's what Elon Musk does, shares of stock. Can I borrow some money so I can pay my living expenses, which they do. They're charged interest, let's say 4, 5, 6%. As they pay back the interest, that interest is tax deductible. So if they have earnings from their dividends from their stocks, let's say they earn $1 million in dividends, let's say they pay $30,000 in interest over the year, they get to deduct the $30,000 off their $1 million gain. It's unbelievable. So, and there's so many other ways with using trusts and different types of trusts to gift stuff to your kids to avoid estate taxes. I mean, my brother works on financial planning software, and it's mostly tax driven and risk management. Anyway, it's fascinating. There's a lot of different ways to do it, but most rich people have what's called a family office, and they manage the investment portfolio for the family or multiple families. Some people outsource it, but I'm sure someone like Melissa understands. I don't know what size company she works with. I mean, everyone needs accounting, but the real money is in the tax returns and financial planning for, and insurance plays a role, because policies can have certain benefits in terms of annuities and stuff like that. It all depends on it's also individualized, because everyone's circumstances are a little different, as Melissa will tell you. Anyway, okay, I'll tell you what, let's do this. If Melissa's still there, is she still there? She's still there. Yeah, let's bring up Melissa. She seemed pretty eager to come up, so let's monologue.
Hi, how are you?
Well, how are you?
Good, good. Um, yeah, I'm a CPA, but I'm not like other CPAs because I'm very anti-capitalist.
Oh, me too. There you go.
Yeah, I worked in corporate finance for
Okay.
15 years. So
Yeah.
I worked at public companies, I worked at smaller companies, I worked in government organizations, and everywhere was like awful. I just can't stand like obviously the goal is to get the people at the top as rich as possible, but the amount of abuse that has to happen down
Yeah.
below, I
Yeah.
couldn't be a part of it. Like they don't see the workers as people, like they're numbers. And
Yeah.
when you're like fueling those decisions with analysis and they don't care about the people and like I just couldn't do it anymore. So I quit in 2021 and I started my own firm and I'm trying to work with I do fractional CFO work for like socially conscious businesses. So
Oh, cool.
yeah, and I have a degree in biological sciences as well. So
Can you
I'm
tell
very
people what CFO means for the audience?
a chief financial officer. So
Okay.
I don't work in like tax returns or audit. I work within a business to help uh, guide things along and put together financials to help make decisions essentially from
So when you
within a
say
company.
fractional, I guess that's so they don't have to hire their own full-time CFO.
Yeah.
You work for them to fulfill that role in sort of a part-time way, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Because paying for a CFO is like 200 grand a year.
Yeah.
So this way, it's like just a monthly fee, and I can work for a bunch of smaller businesses and give them that same advice. Because the problem is when businesses need a CFO or a CPA the most is when they can't afford it, right? So I want to, and I do a lot of work for free. Like let's be real. I'm such a socialist. I just want to help make a difference. And if
Yeah.
I see a company that has a good cause that I'm behind, I'll just hop on and help anyway.
Oh, nice.
I have a degree in science as well, so I'm an environmentalist big time, and
Good.
uh, and that also goes against the whole corporate thing, right? Because they didn't give a crap about the environment either, and so I was just not compatible there. But I started following you, and I really appreciate your content on obviously the current events, and I was so like ignorant to this whole thing. Like I knew nothing about it. I'm Canadian, by the way,
Okay.
and I just, I've learned a lot from you, and I've, done my research as I was told to do, and I just became so pro Palestine that I actually just got off of a ban from LinkedIn. I was taking TikTok videos that were educational and I was posting them on
Mhm.
that platform and I was getting about 600,000 post impressions a week on LinkedIn.
Oh, good.
And so I was, sharing a lot of good stuff there. And then on Christmas Eve, actually, I got a bunch of Israelis found one of my posts, and I think
Oh,
mass
boy.
reported me, and I got my account banned. So
Oh,
I've been
God.
fighting LinkedIn for 11 days, and just today I got it reinstated. They've taken away like 5,000 of my followers, and I'm a little like gun shy. I don't know if I want to keep posting on
Can
there,
can
but
you tell the audience what LinkedIn is so they know what that is?
sure. LinkedIn is it's a platform that I don't typically use because it's just a bunch of old white guys from my corporate history. But it's more of like a professional platform where you put on your your work history and it's a more of a professional networking thing. And yeah, I keep people keep calling me unprofessional for talking about Palestine and politics, but you know, we're humans first, and that's kind of what
Yeah.
I try to bring to it.
Right
So
on.
yeah, so it's a platform I really didn't use that much. I'm on LinkedIn. I think I have like 47,000 followers here, and so I was posting about Palestine, but it was all getting shadow banned, and Instagram as well. No reach. And but then I found that on LinkedIn, I was actually getting thousands of views. So I'm like, okay, I'm just going to keep doing that. And then they got me. But yeah.
So I just followed Melissa because I'm curious if she has 47,000 followers on TikTok. Obviously, she's doing something right. So I would encourage those of you who aren't following Melissa. I'm curious to go take a look at her main page and see what's up. And also, I like to see videos that people have saved or reposted, that kind of thing. So that also tells you a lot about what they're all about. So please follow Melissa, and hopefully that'll give her some new followers and create some more impacts, as they say. Oh, by the way, if you're watching this, if you don't mind, can you somebody please tap on my forehead? I don't usually bug people about this too much, but we want to make sure people are aware of the live. That'll help increase the circulation of it to other people. By the way, Maz is here. If you don't know who Maz is, she lives over in the UK. She's been super helpful, and I'm assuming she's going to help moderate today. So thank you as always, Maz. So when did you get your CPA? How long ago did you get your CPA degree?
It was actually on my wall right here. Uh, November 20, November 2014. So 9 years
Okay,
ago. I did it.
great.
I'm 39. So I got it when I was 30. I was behind because I did my undergrad. I wanted to be a doctor. That was my original plan. So I did my undergrad in science and then I just didn't want to do that anymore. And then
Right.
got a job in an office and then, really liked accounting. Oh, of course, here's my dogs coming to say hi.
Oh, nice.
These are two rescue dogs from Mexico.
Okay.
And so yeah, I just started working like in the office doing accounting work, and I realized if I wanted to get anywhere with accounting, I had to do my CPA. So I went back to school while I
Yeah.
was working full time and did it then. So
Good
yeah.
for you. Now, I wanted to ask you, Melissa, have you ever visited this is not a plug, but I have a link tree in my bio, and about midway down, there's a few groups on Telegram. Have you seen those yet?
No, I haven't, but I've been also meaning to get onto your Patreon as well because I do want to support you in that way. So
Oh, I
I also
appreciate that.
encourage everybody to instead of sending gifts to Chip, go into his link tree and join the Patreon because then he gets all the money, whereas LinkedIn on this platform takes 70%, and
Yeah.
it's kind of ridiculous. Like I know it's kind of the best people can do sometimes, but and then you also aren't dealing with like the censorship and stuff, so you'll probably get much more unfiltered stuff there as well.
Yeah.
There's a few creators I follow on Patreon as well. I had one for a while, but I stopped because I wasn't posting and it felt like such an obligation that I just
Sure.
yeah. But anyway, I will
Yeah.
check out all your stuff.
No, it's thank you for that. So some people are saying, can we please post Melissa's uh, TikTok handle? All you have to do to follow her is to tap on the little box down there. It'll bring up a way to link to her. You just tap her face one more time. It'll take you to her profile, and then you can follow her real quick. It's real easy. Or you can do it right on the box. I'm not sure which one, but it makes. So just to let you know, as far as Patreon goes, if you don't know what Patreon is, it's a method for people who are independent like me to get small donations from a lot of followers so you can survive. But something that a lot of creators do, which I'm also doing, is you create what are called tiers. So the first tier is like $5 and you get like early access to videos, for example. Then the second tier might be $10 and you might get early access to videos as well as access to a private live once a week, for example. I set up 4 tiers last night. I haven't put them into Patreon, but I kind of wrote them down. So today I'm going to put them in. So if you're interested, I mean, we're going to have the highest tier is going to have like a private meeting where everybody's on the screen. We can all just talk conversationally, and I'll teach you whatever the hell you want to know about anything I've learned, which is, like I've poked into a lot of areas. We can talk about trading or investing or whatever. Um, so Melissa, as far as the things that you focus on in your content, is it mostly related on Israel Palestine, or what other things do you like to talk about?
Well, prior to October 7th, I knew, like, I didn't even realize there was an issue. I was so ignorant that I didn't even realize that Israel was a Jewish state. Like, I didn't
Oh
realize that.
wow,
Like, I was, that's, I've been very much math, science, but not politics, not history, geography. Like, I'm autistic, actually. I'm autistic and I have ADHD, and I'm late diagnosed. So I'm learning these things about my brain, and that's just a part of my brain that I'd never even explored. And now,
yeah,
once October 7th happened, and I didn't start immediately talking about it because I was uneducated, but I went down that hyperfixation rabbit hole, and I learned everything, And about 2 weeks in is when I started to post about it, and then that's all I posted about because it was the only thing that mattered. But
right,
my content, 47,000 followers, and I was getting like 200 views per video. So I was like, okay, this isn't working. Most of my content is on anti-capitalism, is on Eat the Rich. I had a petition to our House of Commons here in Canada,
yeah,
sponsored by a federal MP, that was basically about taxing large corporations, getting rid of tax loopholes, calling out the wealth transfer because everyone talks about those citizens that received government funding.
Yeah.
In Canada during COVID, it was $80 billion went to people in CERB, but none of the politicians talk about the 100 billion that went to large corporations for as a wage subsidy. And I worked for corporations during that time, and that was one of my big things was anyone could take the money, and it was supposed to be a wage subsidy to keep these companies from having to lay off people. Meanwhile, they
Mhm.
laid people off anyway. They paid dividends to their shareholders with the money and, large public corporations. And our government won't tell us who took it. And so that the petition I put forward was to disclose all that information. And so it did get the signatures it needed. It still has to be presented in the House of Commons. But that's my thing. It's like eat the rich and, the wealth inequality. That's what I speak about, which also gets censored, like they don't like talking about that either.
Now, those of you who haven't heard of this, there's a platform. I'm sure Melissa's probably heard of this, but it's called Rumble.
I
And have
have
you heard
heard
of
of
that?
it. Yeah, I
Yeah.
have.
So just to let you know, Rumble is a very fast-growing version of YouTube. It's just owned by a different
Okay.
company, and it's very similar, except for one thing, and that is most content is not messed with, which is really nice because you can just
Nice.
do what you so. What I'm trying to do, one of the things I would like to do, because this will touch on what Melissa said. I want to go through, people, they talk about the 1% or the 1/10 of 1%, these people. Well, nobody knows who the hell they are for the most part. We have some idea of some of the really big families, but, there are a lot of individuals who, in my opinion, and again, this is just my approach, everyone's different, but like the head of APAC, I don't think these people should comfortably walk through life without people letting them know as much as possible without breaking laws how we feel about them absconding with most of the money of society. And here's a crazy stat for you. In 1970, corporations and high net worth people contributed 30% of the tax receipts. And right now in 2023, it's down to 7.
Yeah.
So that'll
Yeah.
tell you how much they've been able to save through shenanigans, tax breaks, subsidies, and all the stuff. So that's
Yeah.
pretty
And
bad.
that's all that, being an accountant in corporate, that's the goal, right? Is to pay nothing. And I just couldn't get behind that because those are the organizations that should be paying their fair share or more than their fair share. And back in I think before Reagan, I'm not really sure, but they used to have really high corporate tax rates and high tax rates for high net worth individuals. And over the years, as more conservative governments come in, they take that down. Another thing I talk about a lot too, up in our politics, but it's the same as yours. We're just about 10 years behind you. Is this whole identity left and right politics where everyone's talking about the libs and the conservatives and my big thing, and similar to Rio, I like his content.
Yeah.
It's two sides of the same coin. I know you say the same thing.
Yeah.
Keeps us divided, and people who think that Justin Trudeau in our country is literally the root cause of all evil. It's not like he's not good. I don't like him either, and I have to keep saying that. But
He's a puppet. He's a
he's
pawn.
upholding the system, but it's the system that you're mad at, and it's you're putting your anger in the wrong place. You have a right to be angry. Everything is too expensive, but if you think that Justin Trudeau can control the price of groceries, you're mistaken. And I try to come at it from an educated standpoint. I go into these big public companies' financial statements, and I try to break things down to show people what it actually means, because those statements are purposefully made under like so you can't understand them. They're purposefully 100 pages long with all this legalese,
Yeah.
and it's meant to be so that people don't really know what's going on. So I'm trying to bring that perspective to it. But yeah, we have to get off of the left and right because it's all the same. Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
I couldn't agree more. It's disconcerting that people, a lot of the lives that I see on TikTok are people just going back and forth saying, you're an idiot. No, you're a moron. Oh, Trump's, it's so silly. I'm trying to find my cup of coffee where I put it. That's pretty bad when you're getting older. You can't even find your cup of coffee.
I know
Um,
I do that too.
I did want to mention one thing about content creators because, she mentioned Rio. I try to go out of my way to encourage people to follow other people. I've talked about my Twitter feed. And the very, very top of my Twitter is a message about people who I think are great to follow. So 35 or 40 people over the years that I've found. And again, nobody's perfect. So there may be information that comes out that they've taken some money from somebody where it's kind of, questionable. But as far as I know, and listening to their content over the years, that doesn't seem to be the case. So I try to put those people out there. Also, when I'm on TikToks, different TikTok videos, I try to talk about people who I think are doing great work. Meeting somebody like Melissa is such a joy because these are people we probably would never meet otherwise rather than being here. I did want to share one concerning thing that's really kind of getting bad. Who knows where it's going to go, but if you don't know who Senator Josh Hawley is, Hawley, he's a Republican from Missouri, and he's very anti-TikTok. And he just, it was a video that I just saw before I came on the live, where and I'm going to play it at some point. I'll probably play it today while I just get back to my computer. But what he basically says is that people's opinions, young people especially, is more and more being shaped by social media, and specifically TikTok. And there's a poll that he referred to, I don't know if it's accurate, but he said 50% of young people are okay with what happened on the 7th, as he didn't use the word resistance, he used our pro H group, which isn't the same as being against apartheid and against, G-side and against occupation and blockade, right? I mean, just because that particular group did the resisting, and just because they used tactics, perhaps in some of the unalivings that most of us find abhorrent, the idea of a resistance to and longstanding oppression is something that I think most decent people would support, And so I think they're concerned about that. I think the real reason is they don't want to have the narrative that's been formed over the years being challenged, which it is obviously. And I think more and more people are outraged by what they're seeing with their own two eyes and not necessarily what the news is reporting, which is,
Right.
Good that people are getting to see it finally, because it totally changes the playing field. And the Israelis are losing the PR war big time in this thing.
They are. And I know that they've been threatening to take TikTok away, and it's no wonder. Like, this has always been why, because people aren't being able to be manipulated by their narratives anymore, the corporate media. But part of me is like, I kind of am like, go ahead and do it, because we have a whole bunch of people who are like this close to having an uprising. And if you take away their ability to communicate with each other, I think that would accelerate the process, because they're not just gonna be like, oh, there's no TikTok. Okay, we're just gonna listen to your mainstream media again. Like, I think it's gonna cause a lot. There's not a lot of foresight happening. For the last 10 years, all the powers that be have been just kind of flying by the seat of their pants, I think. They know they're at the end of their reign, and they know people are waking up. And I do see like a mass awakening happening. And I think that it's just like when anything is threatened and they're backed into a corner and they've got no more cards to play, they have to turn to hard fascism. And that's what they're doing, and they're threatening, and people are waking up. And another thing about the whole internet and censorship is, unfortunately for them, they need the internet as much as we do, because they've moved all of their businesses from people to computers, and all their shops from brick and mortar to online. So all of how they sell to us is on these very same apps that they now don't want us to communicate with each other on. So if they go and cut all these apps off so people can't communicate, they also can't sell their shit to us on these apps. So they've really stymied themselves. And that's kind of another thing that's like, they're just, I don't know, like, it's ridiculous. And, I live in Canada, obviously, and what I see happening down in the US is just horrific at this point. Like, I can't believe what I've seen, like, even with just, the women's rights, and it's really, really sad to see. But I feel like it can't go much longer without something drastic happening.
Yeah, I agree. So people are saying in the comments like, well, when is this all going to kick off? What's going to happen with this? So these things don't happen by accident, and everybody has a role to play, right? So I talk about this a lot. So there's basically 3 tools that the public has that most of the wealthy people don't. They have all the money, and they have a lot of influence right now, which is unfortunate. But quote unquote, we the people, we have our sheer numbers. There's a lot more of us than there are of them, physical bodies. Number 2, we have our purchasing power, because we can choose not to buy stuff. And many people in this movement have been doing that with companies like Starbucks, McDonald's, Disney, etc. And then we have our labor, which is probably the most powerful tool. And, just like within a union, people join the union just in case they need leverage against the company to get a better deal or maintain workers' rights. And sometimes they have to put leverage on the company to achieve some of these goals. Well, it's no different in a large movement. It's the same exact thing, just in a larger scenario. So the union has escalatory tactics that they use. People give money to the union out of their paycheck so that if and when they have to go on strike to withhold their labor, they have money to cover. It's like a rainy day fund. They can cover people who have gaps in their finances. The same thing is done in a broader level. It's called mutual aid. It's like a union
Mm-hmm.
fund, but for your neighborhood or whomever you want to coordinate with. You build a coalition of different groups, it's decentralized, and you have some stated goals, which everyone can agree upon: get money out of politics, no crony capitalism, maybe limit or eliminate lobbying,
Mm-hmm.
maybe have health care for everybody, or whatever the group consensus is. You have a common set of very narrow but specific outcomes, and then you use the tools you have to try to put leverage on the power structure to achieve those outcomes. That's pretty much it. Everybody can play a role. That's why I asked Melissa. Different people are pushing these things, and everyone's kind of, waking up to this. And that voting, it's great to do your civic duty, but if somebody else owns both people who you vote for, what you have two choices that are basically, red or blue, but it's the same structure, and you're not really going to get anything done with that. And we've seen that with this issue, right? We're
Mm-hmm.
stymied as the public because the system doesn't support the constituency. So one thing you can do for content creators, if you want people like me and Melissa, who are messengers of this issue to spread the awareness, you know, when things like this live happen, go through your contacts and invite people here, because that's going to
Yeah.
spread more awareness. Tell people in the comments about people you like. On another
Mm-hmm.
video, maybe somebody who has a huge following, put in the comments, hey, I love this person, Melissa. Here's her contact because she's doing a lot of work on XYZ. We have to start spreading and cross-pollinating the word about other content. The other thing that's really important on top of that, and most people, not everybody's going to be on camera like Melissa and I, or have a big following. That's okay. Everyone can do a part. But the other thing is, people like me and Melissa, because we're doing this advocacy and we're telling the truth, not only do our videos get either downcycled and not make it into people's feeds, which is bad enough, but some of our videos get taken down, or sometimes they cut the audio, which I always think is,
Our accounts just get banned
or the accounts
altogether.
go down. So the other
Yeah.
thing that people need to do, in my opinion, and I hope you'll follow this, a lot of people don't, but so we're vulnerable, right? And if you like
Yeah.
people like me and Melissa, the best thing you can do is find out other places where we can connect with each
Mm-hmm.
other. It's almost like fault tolerance, like having a backup to your computer files. If your computer dies, then you got nothing, right?
Yeah.
All your pictures are gone. So we need you to be in the cloud, basically, with respect to our relationship. So most content creators like myself, I don't know if Melissa has this, they have a link tree or some other way to
Yeah, I
direct
do.
you.
I have a
Yes,
Discord server as well.
yeah, so I'm also building a website and a Discord server
Yeah.
that will be part of the Patreon stuff I'm going to do.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea is to give people more value, more information, and more direct connection with
Yeah.
the content creator, so that you enjoy. It's worth $15 a month or whatever you end up spending. So it's really important, though. I always ask people, can you please follow my backup account? And
Yeah.
only about 3 or 4% of people actually do it. So what I've started doing now is periodically I'll start my live on my main channel, the one we're on right now, and then I will say I'm going to finish the second half over here on the backup.
Smart. Yeah,
Kind of
that's smart.
forcibly migrates people. And in addition, with that same thought process, most content creators are starting their lives, let's say on YouTube, and then they move the second half to Rumble to, again,
Smart.
cross-pollinate the platforms. If we don't get other places to connect, we're not going. If Senator Hawley or whomever is successful in taking TikTok away from the American audience, we're not going to have these lives, these conversations. So if you choose to kind of just bury your head and not do those things, which is fine, it's your choice, we may lose each other entirely, which will be a real shame, right? So if you want to be involved, you want to see change get better, which I hope you
Yeah.
do, you're going to have to do something. And if that
Right.
something is as simple as just following somebody else, that's not asking a lot, right? I mean, we're not asking you to go out and stand on the corner with a sign and yell at people and get them involved, or even organize. Just simply just help spread the message by
Right.
being available to the audience. So, how do you feel about that, Melissa?
I think that's a great idea, and I have just on some of the things you said, some like tips. So people are sharing your Linktree thing, and like the Linktree website, like you know how it's like a program you pay for, Linktree, whatever. I used to have one of those, and someone gave me the advice that once you do have a website, make a
Yeah.
page on your website, like chipbarnes.com/Linktree, and use
Yeah.
that. And so like my link tree is actually attached to my website. And the reason for that is because
Yeah.
then I can see the analytics and it's like it's owned by me rather than Linktree. That's the first. Second thing is I use this tool called repurpose.io. And every time I post a TikTok, it automatically takes it and takes the watermark off of it and reposts it to Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Pinterest, like all of them. And it just
Wow.
automatically does that. And you can even put like a footnote on it. You can control, don't repost it if I use the hashtag FYP. Like it's, and
Right.
then you don't have to worry about manually reposting everywhere. So I would definitely look into that if I were you, Chip, because you could even actually set it up. So if you post on your account, you could set it so that it automatically reposts it to like a secondary account even.
Yeah.
And it's just it's the most valuable tool I use. So there's that. And then everything you're saying is completely right about politics, and something that I think is an issue obviously is that the people like you and I, we don't strive for power because power isn't what drives us. Money isn't what drives us. So that's why we have the people in charge that we do, because they want power and money. And
Yeah.
people who are good people aren't going to are repulsed by politics. And the idea of sitting in a room with all of those sociopaths is enough to give me a nervous breakdown. So people tell me all the time, like I have a couple MP friends in the NDP party in Canada, so they're kind of the most left,
Yeah.
and they say, "Oh, you should run," and I can't do it. I can't do it. But we need people like us to run, and so when we do find people who are willing to actually join that party, we got to support them. That's the thing. And I think as a society, the issues we have in our Western society are individualistic nature, our, lack of community. And the biggest thing is our consumerism, because as much as it bothers us to be seeing what's happening on the other side of the world, the the lives we lead are causing that, right? We are consuming, and there's a cost to that, to other people that are being exploited. And that has always been the case, but we've never been able to see it. And nothing will change if we still are striving to just own more shit,
Right.
and buy more shit, because we are fueling that abuse. We can't just blame the corporations, because we are the ones who are feeding the systems. And so there needs to be such a foundational shift in the way we all think and consume, right? And so I'm a fan of the whole no buy economy, where, we just trade with our neighbors, we swap things, we don't need new things. That we've been trained to believe that having these new shiny objects are going to make us happy, and they won't. That's not where we find our happiness from.
Yeah. I agree
So,
100%.
yeah.
Yeah, it's called voluntary simplicity for those who don't know the term. And so that just means you're keeping things really simple, only buying what you absolutely need, kind of getting out of the trap of consumerism. And there's a guy, by the way, if you don't listen, do you know who Nate Hagens is?
I don't recognize the name. I may.
You would absolutely love
Nate Hagen.
Nate Hagens. He's got a website or
Okay.
YouTube channel called The Great Simplification, which is talking
Oh,
about a
okay.
lot of
Yeah,
these
I'm
other
sure I
things.
would love him.
But getting back to community, Melissa hits the nail on the head. We've gotten so hyper individualized, and it's intentional, by the way, because
Hmm.
if you're not working with others, you can't spread messages like this purposely. You can't resist, somebody exploiting you. So, and also the fact that money now is consolidated up at the New York Wall Street level. If you look at the landscape of places where you can go do something, whether it's buying food or whatever else, everything's chain store now, right? You go to any city, it looks the same. You
Hmm.
go to Tampa, Florida, you go to somewhere else in the middle of Texas, it's all the same thing. It's like Taco Bell, KFC, Burger King, McDonald's, Home Depot, blah, blah, blah. And every time we spend a dollar, or whether it's online chain stores like Amazon, et cetera, the money goes to the investor class. It doesn't
Hmm.
stay at the working class level. And Melissa, I wanted to ask you, have you studied the business structure? Are you aware of the business structure called the cooperative business?
Yes, yes, I have. I've done some videos on that as well. I did a whole series about a year ago on greedflation and explaining the monopoly issue we have, right? Because capitalism, one of the things that makes it fair is having proper competition. And what's happened is everything has been bought up by the same few companies, so there is no real competition. And so I'm trying, I'm a big advocate for small businesses, which are obviously have a hard time competing with these big, huge conglomerates. But yeah, the co-op model is something that I've looked into and I do believe in. I actually have a client I'm kind of working with to try to get something like that going. I think that is, unfortunately, they all kind of go out of business because it is a bit, they don't have the same economies of scale, right? And people, that's what people, I try to explain to people is they say, well, I want to go to the farmer's market, but it's more expensive. How does that make sense? And it's like, it's because they don't have the economies of scale. They can't they can't give it to you at such a low rate because they are just so small, and it is going to cost more to support the smaller guys, and that's unfortunately the barrier
Yeah.
here because people don't have the money. So
Right.
I also try to say, people are like, I want to support small, but I can't afford anything, so I have to go to Walmart. And I don't want people to feel guilty about that because, if that's all you can afford, that's all you can afford. And it's just really shitty. But if you can afford it, support local, support small, and avoid the
Yeah.
bigger companies if you can. That's what I do. I try to, but I do know there's a lot of people and a lot of the food banks up here. I'm sure they're the same down there, but the food banks have had a 400% increase. Like they just, so many people are depending on food banks now, and yeah, it's a real problem. And donating to food banks is a band-aid solution, right? It's not gonna
Right.
solve the systems. So
Yeah.
yeah, but co-ops would be wonderful.
Yeah, by the way, for those of you who don't know how a co-op works, let me just briefly thumbnail it out there. And by the way, for those of you who don't know even who I am, you're probably like, who the hell's this dude? My name is Chip Barnes. My guest is Melissa, who's a CPA and has a lot of great information to share. But I'm an Army veteran. I've been on TikTok for about 10 weeks or so, brand new to social media. Wish I would have done it sooner. But I learned about the Israel-Palestine conflict when I was 21 years old, and I'm 56. So it just fascinated me because it was the opposite of what I'd been told. Like Melissa said, I didn't know much about Israel. And the more I learned, the more I was kind of disgusted. And it kind of made me feel like these Palestinian people are being oppressed, and it just angered me. And so it's been an interest of mine ever since. So I'm not a total scholar like Liam O'Mara, who I had on a week ago, but I know enough that I can kind of make my way around. So, but I'm an Army vet, so I served in the first Gulf War, so I know what combat's like. I was on the front lines in a tank, of all things. Interesting life, but basically, I'm somebody who tries to, somebody challenged me, like, why are you for the underdog? What was it about your childhood? Like, it wasn't my childhood. It's just that I care. Like, I care for people that are being marginalized. Why wouldn't you? And I'm in a position of privilege. Like Melissa just said, we live very good lives here in the West, and we're consuming at high levels when other people aren't. So basically, a cooperative, I'll get back to that if you don't know. A cooperative is a business model where it's more flat. What do I mean by that? Most businesses right now are hierarchical. You either have a privately owned company, maybe a small business or medium-sized company where there's a family that owns it, or an individual owner, maybe a partnership. There's not like usually lots of shareholders. If they take money on, it's usually from a bank in the form of debt. But a bigger company is normally what they call publicly traded, which means that their shares, they initially do an offering and they sell to the public ownership shares in their company. They have less ownership, but they bring in a ton of money. And that's when people get paid a ton. It's like cashing out, so to speak. But the management of these companies, you may know this from the news, the average officer in a company gets paid anywhere between 100 and 300 times the average worker, which is insane, right? A lot of these CEOs are getting paid 20, 30, 40 million dollars a year as their base compensation. Then they have stock incentives if their company does well. A lot of times they buy back their shares with borrowing money, like Melissa said, or taking it from the government, and that appreciates the share price. They get more bonus money. It's this disgusting cycle of wealth accumulation that doesn't benefit the working class. So how is a cooperative different? So first of all, the cooperative, everyone's an owner. So there's no one or two owners at the top. There's no public shareholders. The ownership of the company is through the workers and through the management. There are people that manage the company because you need to have solid management to run a business properly. Now, for some sales of products, because of scale, like Melissa said, it's hard to buy in bulk. If somebody's got 1,000 stores nationwide and you have two in a state, obviously you don't get the same good prices as they do. So sometimes it's harder to sell something at the market and people have to pay more, like Melissa said. But for services, like what Melissa does, if you had a group of 50 accountants and it was all owned equally, which some get to be partners, but so for a service business, the product side of it doesn't come to bear as much. In terms of real estate, it might if you have a huge company. But in a cooperative, let's say I was the quote unquote manager of the business, for example, or let's say it was Melissa. Melissa would get paid somewhere between 4 times and maybe 10 times what the average worker makes. So let's say 50,000 is the average. So that means Melissa would make about 200,000 a year, which is on the low end for somebody who's in a CEO role, or maybe as much as like a 500,000 at the most.
Right.
So most of the money isn't flowing to quote the top of the company, and therefore you can pay the workers more. And if the company does well, everybody benefits. So you come to work each day and you don't feel like you're just a cog in the wheel in a cubicle with a fluorescent light over your head and being treated like a number. You're a person. You get to vote. By the way, there's a democratic nature. So when there are big decisions to be made in the company, like vacation time or compensation for the owners or the managers, or are we going to take on loans to grow the company, or whatever the case may be, there's a democratic process. It's not like somebody in an ivory tower gets to decide what's going to happen to you. You have a say. So how'd you like to come to work every day where you have a chance to make more money if the company does well? You really want to cooperate with your coworkers between departments because it benefits everybody. And you feel like you're part of something so that you don't go to work feeling marginalized. I think everyone would love that, right? So at the community level, that's something that we can do. I have an MBA in finance. Melissa has a CPA. Maybe she and I will get together and start a cooperative.
That'd be
Right? You
wonderful.
never know. So
Yeah.
these are all things we can do. Maybe we'll create a certified public accountant partnership and go talk to people who are going through school and present this. It's very attractive to people, right? The other thing about this model is you attract the best people because they want to be in a place like this rather than some big corporate thing that doesn't really benefit them, right? So again, these are all things that we can do at the community level, with credit unions instead of big banks, all these things are things we can do and we need to do and we have to do, and if we're going to make a difference, in addition to organizing and having a national movement like we talked about earlier.
Yeah, it's definitely, we need to be thinking along those lines. And I actually had a thought, oh, my daughter has a play date here. My husband will get the door, but I'm just going to close my door here. It might get a little loud. I had this thought. So I've had some people reach out to me because they wanted me to do like executor type stuff. And
Oh, sorry, that was accidental, Melissa.
I'm on. Can
Sorry
you hear
about
me?
that. I accidentally muted you, which I'm
Oh,
very sorry. I didn't
no,
mean to
it's
do it.
okay. I don't know what you missed. I sometimes get people to asking me to do like executor type estate work, and like that's something I've never done, but I am kind of more interested in learning about it so I can do it, because I was also thinking about wealth redistribution, because I know that there's a lot of like wealthy people who maybe don't have kids, or boomers who might be feeling some of the guilt about whatever. And so I've had this thought to learn about that area, and then create a business that, even if it's not they're leaving their estate to good causes, but even just that 5% that the executor gets from a big estate, so that the kids don't have to deal with being an executor, and then that money can get redistributed to like mutual aid type things, to try to tug on the people's heartstrings to be like, hey, let's give some of my estate back, and let's do good with it, or have the executor actually redistribute some of my wealth to other causes. So I've been thinking about that as a business idea, as well, because I think we need to take take from the rich and give to the poor, however we can do that. So that's just another idea I had as well.
Yeah, that's great. Again, all these things are interlocked. So the keystone problem, in my opinion, is that there's these existing power structures that make it impossible for even the best of people to serve their constituents in most cases, especially with the issues that affect the ownership class. So how do you break that, right? It's the same problem we're seeing with Israel-Palestine. You can't get through to your constituents and voice your concerns and say, hey, we don't want to see this happening. This is disgusting. Their allegiances are elsewhere, unfortunately. They're kind of forced to have their allegiance, even if they don't personally agree with it. Because of political survival and other requirements, they don't have as much of a choice, and they have to go along to get along to go along, which is unfortunate. So that power structure has to be broken. It just has to be. That's the only thing ahead. It may be difficult or impossible. Somebody said in the chat earlier, there's nothing we can do, or it can't work, it's not going to work or something. That's possible. right? It's within the realm of possibility that no matter what we do and no matter what we try, this power structure may continue to operate until it falls from its own weight based on its excess. But I think the things we could do, if we can break the power structure and change the legislation, we have to get corporate personhood gone. That's got to go. We have to get money as speech. That's got to go. We have to eliminate things like super PACs. We have to limit the amount of money that can be spent on elections, period. We have to have some universal access to healthcare so people aren't having their paychecks and their standard of living is destroyed by having to pay these huge premiums to protect their family. And then in many cases, the insurance companies don't even cover a tragic situation in your family. So it's all geared towards profit, and not everything that's profit driven is good for the common good. There are situations where it helps competition for innovation and making products and stuff, but not for healthcare. For God, not for, you don't have the fire company and say, "Oh, sorry, you didn't pay your dues this month. We can't come put out your fire." No, you have a fire company that serves the public through the county or through the state. So there's plenty of examples of how things are socialized. We just need to have more of them that serves the community and doesn't serve the power structure and the oligarchy. Problem is they have a really firm hold on everything where we can't make reform within the existing political system. They have a lock on things. So people like Rio and people like Melissa realize that. And redistribution of wealth is simply by changing the rules so that they don't get to keep as much of that ill-gotten gain by skirting the tax laws and getting subsidies from government and robbing some of these government programs like PPP that came out in the pandemic and the CARES Act and stuff like that, where they just take massive, massive chunks out. And look at the war state. When money gets allocated to Ukraine or Israel, it doesn't go to Ukraine or Israel. It goes to Boeing. It goes to Northrop Grumman. It goes to Raytheon. It goes to Lockheed Martin. It goes to the weapons manufacturers that quote defense industry. And every single one of these munitions that are dropping on a poor 10-story building that's unaliving 26 people comes from one of these companies. And they're making outrageous profit margins, basically getting away with that extra bit of money. Something should normally cost this. They charge this because it's an emergency. And therefore that money gets cycled back to the ownership class. Those are the people that own majority sharehold in those companies. So it's a money laundering system in general, from the treasuries, using the military and the other tools of government to increase their net worth in many cases.
Yeah, it definitely is. We have universal health care up here in Canada, but it's provincial, right? So the healthcare system is run provincially, and we have a lot of conservative premiers right now of our provinces, and they are starving our healthcare, and they're trying to make it more American. They're trying to privatize it and enrich their rich friends, as the conservatives do. So they are underfunding it. They're underpaying nurses, but as it is right now, we have care that's free. And everyone should have that. And if another reason why, if I was an American, I would be absolutely furious, because not only are you funding it, but you're not being provided with the basic necessities. Like, what do you even get for your tax dollars at this point? So yeah, it's really, really frustrating. I don't know how you guys. Hi, buddy. You feeling neglected? Sorry.
So Melissa, I want to ask you a favor. We have another guest that's waiting to come on, but you've
Yeah,
been great. So would you mind emailing me at my email address? Would that be okay? We can take our conversation
for
offline.
sure. Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah. I'd love to be in contact.
it's just chipbarnesonline at Gmail.
Okay, yeah, I'll be in contact for sure, and we'll stay in touch. And I'd love to do this again sometime. So
Yeah.
you have a good rest of your day, and keep up the great work.
And let me just say before you go, if you tap on the box that Melissa's in, you can follow her, which I recommend you do. She's someone who knows a lot and she's got a great heart. The first thing I'm doing when I get off this live is I'm going to her page and looking at her stuff, and I'm going to go to her link tree and I'm going to follow her somewhere else so that she does get the uninvited problem that I've had. I'll still be able to stay in touch with her in addition to the email we talked about. So
Excellent.
everybody, that was awesome. If you liked Melissa, please type the number 1 in the chat. Let's see a bunch of ones come through, because I think Melissa was great. Give her some
Thank
kudos.
you.
Anything else you want to say
Thank
as far,
you.
do you go live at all, Melissa?
I used to more. I haven't recently, since all this has been going on. Just so afraid of like the Zionists coming for me, like they do. I don't know. But yeah, no, I do sometimes go live. I like to. Well,
Wonderful.
thanks,
Well,
guys. Thank
it's great,
you.
great having you, Melissa.
Yeah, it's so good to see you. I've been watching you for a long time. I always
Awesome.
love listening to you. So
Thank
anyway,
you.
yeah, we'll chat soon. Bye.
Thanks for coming on. Appreciate it very much. Yeah, that was great, huh? What a person with a lot of knowledge and heart's in the right place, a lot of good ideas. So can't wait to collaborate with Melissa. Okay, we have another guest that's been waiting patiently named Goldie. So, Goldie, it's your turn to have the stage. What's on your mind?
Hi, Chip. I'm actually, let me put my video on because I like to look people in the eye when I speak with them. So I'm absolutely honored to communicate with you. I've been listening to you since day one. Like I think October. When did you open up your account? Because like you had,
Like October 5th or 6th, I think.
yep. That's when I seen you. That's when I seen you, and I thought like, oh my gosh, thank God, because as soon as the conflict hit, we had a solid educator for us, and you followed the conflict for a long time, and I have as well. I followed about 20 years in college. I had the opportunity to learn from it.
Okay.
So I do a lot of public speaking. I speak to city council. I'm currently working on wedging my way into a meeting with the mayor. We have bylaws within our county where we cannot get into internal, like what is it called? International affair bylaws. So we can't
Right.
have, we're requesting to have something on the agenda for Palestine, a resolution in order so we can, like Oakland and Richmond, stand in solidarity and call for a permanent ceasefire. I'm wondering, with your knowledge on this, what can you share with me to best be a pillar of communication and to try to get around the bylaws? Because isn't it true that if our support is there, our government is there, our political support is within them, the people in Congress have dual citizenship there. Blinken is a citizen there in Israel, and if that's called an internal it's called an international affair that we aren't allowed to get involved in, but we are involved, right? So what would you be your suggestion? And two, when we are debating and when we're public speaking, what is the best way that do you suggest, what topic should I know best about? Should I know in and out to thoroughly represent the Palestinian conflict? Because again, we're just an echo, and I've dedicated my life to it since October 7th. I've just shifted. I've always been an advocate, but it's now going to be something that I invest every single day in my life. So
Oh,
I'm
wow.
here for you to teach me and mold my mind and figure it out, because in our panels that we go up, we really honor the people who support it, who have been in the military, like yourself, because you come from this position of being very well rounded on both sides, like you from a military perspective. And now you're so lovingly sharing your time and your energy, which I do honor. I honor you very, very much. And I'm very grateful to even share space with you and to be called up
Oh,
and
thank you.
communicate. So,
Well, I
absolutely.
can promise you I'm just a regular old person. If you ever saw me walking
You're
around,
not.
regular old dude, I really
You're
am. I
not.
mean, I'm a
You
simple
always say
guy.
that. You're not.
Well,
You're
I like to
amazing.
think of, well, thank you. It's very kind of you to say. So I'm just trying to do what I can to speak out and talk about a lot of things, but this especially because it's more time sensitive. But okay, so you mentioned, I had one question for you. You mentioned this local, what do you call it, bylaws?
Yeah, so there's a bylaw inside Santa Clara County where we are not allowed to get involved in internal affairs. We all went to Congress, we all went and spoke, we all went to City Hall, and they basically said the next day, hundreds of people went. First off, our 3 minutes got shut down to one. I did go to the podium and speak. I did so anti-inflammatory, because you suggest that be as anti-inflammatory as possible. The next day they came out saying, refused it, blocked it. We will not put a Palestinian resolution on the agenda to even talk about, to even discuss, because there's bylaws within our. And then it's funny, the 2 years that those bylaws came into place, one
Yeah.
year it came up and then they updated it, were two huge conflict times in Palestine. Huge. So I'm sure that is deeply connected
So at the
because it's a
county level,
Silicon Valley.
is your structure of government, you have a county executive, then you have different reps for different regions within the county, or how does it structured?
Mm-hmm. Yes,
Similar?
so we have yeah, it's a county, and then we have the city. So the city does small time stuff, and then the county does the entire county that covers all the different cities. So
Right.
we're going to start with the mayor of San Jose, and we're finding, and correct me if I'm wrong, that if you focus on small time government, small time politics, where your voice is more heard, right? The pond is smaller and the fish are greater. then you can be like kind of like the tide of change, you know, the ripple that starts that, and it kind of echoes. So many different counties are starting to say permanent ceasefire and the blockade, because
Yeah.
Oakland's, I don't know if you got to read it, but Oakland's ceasefire proposal to that they passed it, was very strongly worded. It called Israel apartheid. It asked to stop the blockade. It went in. Same of the verbiage you speak on. They said it loud and proud.
That's great. Yeah,
Isn't that
first of all,
great?
yeah, I want to commend you that for those of you who don't know, the local level is where politics does make a huge difference. So at the county level, and then the state level, of course, has a lot more influence from the bigger money, but less so than Congress. But at the local level, the biggest money, if you don't know this, the biggest money that goes to local politicians is from real estate developers, because they have to get the permits and
Ooh.
the zoning to get something done. So my first suggestion would be find an influential developer who's pro-Palestinian, or at least maybe not, who's neutral, and let that person
Okay.
talk to the mayor. They're going to have the biggest weight in terms of getting the ear of the mayor, because let's face it, there's a lot of money going back and forth behind the scenes. That's just how it works. So
Mm-hmm.
that's the first thing. Get a powerful person on your side to advocate for you, because they have a better chance of getting you the time of day. And then as far as getting this resolution, I don't know exactly what the wording is. My other suggestion would be find out other municipalities that have been successfully getting through
I
these.
printed them out.
Yeah, there you go. So
I
that's a
printed
good
them
idea
all
there.
out. I printed
So
them all out
you're
and I
thinking about the
just
right
copy and
things.
pasted.
Now, you're doing all the right things. So just continue on that path. It's just a matter of hammering away. And the other thing is to build coalitions of other groups who are like-minded. So the more groups you can get, you bring in a lot more people. Obviously, you can get signatures on a petition, whatever like that. So if you have any events that are going on locally where you can table, stand in front of, I used to stand up at things called Art Fest in my town. And I would stand there on the hottest day of the year with a sign that said, sign here if you want no smoking in bars. Because when I was younger, I couldn't stand the smoke when I would go out to watch a sporting event. I'd come home and just, whatever. That took me 5 years with a few other people's help to get that one done, which is
I
a long
remember when
time,
that
right?
happened. That spread like wildfire. That
Yeah.
was
So
beautiful because we were, as kids, there was no smoking sections, but that still obviously trickled over. So thank you for that. That's beautiful.
yeah, I mean, it's state by state, right? So
I
I
know,
think
but California took it on immediately.
yeah, California was for 1993 they did it, which was awesome. So they were the vanguard, like they are with most changes. Most things come from California, which is great. Of course, now they have a lot of problems because of different policies. But anyway, we'll talk about that later. But so you're doing all the right things, I would say. And then so to address your other question, you said, what are the best ways to advocate for the issue and engage in exchanges? So I like to share resources with people. What I found is that just like you and I, there was a time when we didn't know about whatever issue you want to pick out of a hat, Israel, Palestine, or other stuff. And many
Hmm.
people are in that progression and they haven't reached certain places where others have reached. It's not their fault. In fact, the whole system is geared towards having them not reach it. The
It's
narrative,
designed that way. It's created that way.
yeah, it's on purpose. So all we can do for anybody, whether it's a drug addict or somebody who doesn't have the information, is give them an opportunity to embrace something. Like you're not going to get a drug addict to stop doing drugs because you say stop. And you're not going
Yeah,
to get
for
somebody to
sure.
read something because you say read it. What you can do is tell a story. So a drug addict, you can say, hey, my friend Kenny was doing heroin until he was like 34. He almost had an overdose or whatever. He's now clean and sober. He's living a great life. He's got a beautiful girlfriend, a great job. That's a story that somebody can identify with and think, well, that's possible for me, right? Same idea here. You say, hey, I was talking to my friend Joe, and you know what? The things I'm hearing you talk about sounded really similar to my friend Joe when we first started talking. But my friend Joe was open-minded enough to watch a documentary called Life in Occupied Palestine, and it was amazing to see how much it changed what he thought. That's all you got to say.
So bring in the between the two opposing subjects, bring in something that is in the middle between the two of them. Like,
Not necessarily, no, not in the middle. No. So, for example, if you
or
watch the documentary,
something of relation, like something that they can relate to.
not
Like
even
you
that.
said,
So, well, let me get it out. So,
okay.
they most likely most people, and I find this the case, most people are pretty decent. So
Yes,
if
I agree.
they understand right and wrong and they understand oppressed versus oppressor, but if they don't understand the context and they don't have the history, it's hard for them to identify those two power variables. So you're trying to provide them a basis to better understand something. Shorter and more concise, the better initially. And then as they become more curious, you can feed them. It's like you don't want to feed somebody with a fire hose, right? You want to give them a drink of water. So Give them a little drink. One of the ones I recommend on Abby Martin's YouTube channel, it's called it's the Empire Files. It's just something called Palestine 101. And that's a primer for the general thumbnail sketch of the Nakba, what's happened since the 67 war and what happens to Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank. It's like a quick like, yo, what the hell? This is not what I thought. Then they can go do more research by reading Norman Finkelstein's books or Ilyan Pape's Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine or some of the longer documentaries like Al Nakba. And so
Okay.
you want to, it's like you can take a horse to water, but you can't make the horse drink. Your idea is to get the horse to the water. That's what I try to do.
Okay. And I see you when so I've seen you like pivot these conversations where a Zionist will come up and say, oh, well, there was never a president, or, well, there was never a real Palestine. And I see you take this pivotal opportunity to really to lay out that ideal. And so I'm finding I get stuck in that region, in that area where I get like pivot, and again, we're just echoes for the Palestinian people, correct? So we're just trying to figure, but I'm just grateful for you. And
Yeah.
you always play that down, but I want to tell you to your face, you're a phenomenal human being.
Well, thank you.
The movement appreciates you. You come with a very eloquent, articulated way to educate us. You've taught me so much about this conflict and have encouraged me to
You see
dedicate my life
my
to it.
head, my head's getting bigger. You see that? It's getting
Yeah,
bigger,
and
getting bigger.
it should get it. Let it. You're phenomenal. And
I
I'm
appreciate that.
and so I have I mean, you're so would you ever consider getting on panels and speaking, because
Yeah.
you like debate? Oh my gosh. Okay, so
Yeah.
I have a friend who has panels, and I sent him your video. A sister, Michelle with an N, is in the group. She does really good panels too, but your way of presenting your arguments can
Mhm.
really teach us, because we do blow our head a lot. We get so worked up. I'm not Palestinian, I'm indigenous, I'm Native American.
Right.
So I feel like my DNA has been activated, and I'm in a space of remembrance of what happened to my people, and I'm seeing it in real time. So I get very emotional, and I need to learn to stay in my space. So I'm reading The Art of War right now, because I believe that the art of war can be utilized in tactics
Yeah.
from great to small.
I
It's
agree.
really phenomenal. Yeah, so I try to teach my comrades that, like, if you read The Art of War, you can use it in conflicts, in interpersonal relationships at work, all the way down to a war setting. So I try to stay in my space and calm, but I admire you and I appreciate you. So
Yeah.
if we were, so another thing, if we could do you do like Zooms where we could pay you for an hourly fee, and you can just educate us, and just like in a personal setting, where you can just like build a framework for us to figure out the best ways to execute in an argument and stay in, because your knowledge and your ability to do so is phenomenal. I'll email you, but
So
that was another thing I wanted to
what,
ask.
I haven't done this yet, but I would imagine that other people have come up with counterpoints, if you want to call it that. I know the Israelis have a whole manual about this. So if you type in, um, responses to Israeli, propaganda, and I'm sure someone has come up with a list of things that are typically said that are also responded to in a certain way. And I haven't done that. I probably know most of it, but that might be a resource you can check out ahead of time. I'll do the
Mm-hmm.
same if I was to come onto a forum like that, just to have an idea what people have thought before me. It's amazing. Most people have thought about most things we bring up, right? There are a lot of smart people out there who think of these things. So, like I said, I very rarely figure out anything on my own. I almost always just take from others who have done the work, and then I just kind of repackage it. But
Same.
I wanted to share one other suggestion for you. There's two things. One is, remember, nation states were not a standard fare for most of human history. They were just empires or territories or tribes that traded with each other, that sometimes fought each other, just like there were in North America with the indigenous, different sects of Indians, Native American Indians who
Yeah.
were identified with certain parts of the area, like the Apache and the Cherokee and others. So basically what you want to do is you can say about Golda Meir, this is great. So when people say there's no such thing as Palestine because it wasn't a state, you can say, hey, things weren't always states, and a people can be a people without being in a formal state. They're just identified from a standard background in history and culture. But on second of that, you can actually say, do you know who Golda Meir is? And they'll go, yeah, she was the female prime minister. You're like, well, great. Well, if she said that she was Palestinian, would that convince you there was a Palestine? And they'll go, well, I don't say, well, I have a video for you. So if you go to YouTube and type in Golda Meir, I am Palestinian, It's an interview with a British interviewer in 1970 or 1971, not too long before she passed away. And she says in the interview, the territory between the borders of Israel and the Jordan River, and even on the east bank of the Jordan River, is Palestine. I'm a Palestinian. I carried a Palestinian passport from 1921 to 1948. I'm a Palestinian. So
Beautiful.
that's irrefutable evidence you can give to somebody in video form that they can look at.
Beautiful.
I keep a list of these resources in a notepad. So if somebody, that's my version of responding to different people.
Look, I have my notepad too.
Yeah.
It's just full of, and I update it, and I'll go back and update it after this conversation, and like then I have my go-to, and I try. And then so
Cool.
yeah, okay. So nation state were not actual states, they were tribes. And okay, got that. I love that.
Yeah.
Gold in
Yeah.
my ear. Okay. All right. Well, I
Yeah.
don't want to be selfish, so I'll take anything else you want to tell me, but I do want to be able to share you. I mean, I could be on here with you and talk for hours,
Well, what I
but
would say is, if you want to coordinate that thing you talked about, we'll figure out the details. You can email me at chipbarnesonline@gmail
perfect.
if you want to.
We'll do. We'll
And then
do.
the
I
other
have
thing
about 7 people who would love to love it.
Yeah, the other thing you can do is we have Discords. I have a Discord server, but there are other people who have set up Discord servers, which is just a way for people to communicate on a platform. Or there's things called Telegram. And I have some groups on Telegram. If you look at my link tree in my bio, it makes common sense. There's one called Palestine in Focus. There's another one called Action for Change, which is on those bigger issues we've been talking about. So lots of ways to
Okay.
plug in, but I'd love to hear your update on the local bylaw issues if
Oh,
and
I
when you have
will.
some.
I already wrote out I took bits and pieces. I wrote out the draft for them. I have a meeting with someone who does civil engagement, and he sits in the office. He's pro-Palestinian.
Yeah.
And that's coming up. And then I want to meet, I'm not going to stop until I meet the mayor face to face myself. So
Excellent.
we'll get there.
Yeah.
I'm gonna make it happen.
Find a real estate
So
developer.
thank
That's
you for
going to
your
be your best,
time.
shortest path.
Oh
Yeah.
yes, I have that down. And I think, and you know what, in our area, there's a lot of Palestinian
There
developers
you
out
go.
here. There's a lot of them because
And by the way,
they
they'll know the bigger people too. So if let's say they don't have the chutzpah to get, or they don't have the power, they'll know who are the power players because those people know each other.
Yep, perfect. Done. I'll do that. That's my next project. Thank you I have homework now.
All
I
right,
appreciate
terrific.
you, Chip.
Glad I can help. Yeah, thanks for all
Have
the
a
nice
beautiful
words too.
day.
Appreciate
Oh,
you.
absolutely. Absolutely. I mean
Good.
them. Every word. I mean
Well,
them.
good luck with your efforts. I wish you luck. So yeah, that's somebody taking actual action on the ground, which is wonderful. She's not even Palestinian, but she identifies with marginalized people because of the history of North America, which is despicable and unforgivable. And so I'm like 7 generations down the line of, I don't even know if my great whatever did anything about that. But so somebody earlier today said in the chat, or earlier a few moments ago said, "Do you condemn Hamas?" So I did a tweet today. This is funny. So people are always saying that, right? It's almost like a litmus test before you can engage in conversation. So I've gotten this before. Do you acknowledge the Holocaust was real? And do you condemn Hamas? And do you acknowledge the existence, and are you for the existence of the state of Israel? And they want to give you a litmus test for you to have the ability to legitimately return back. So I'm going to go to my Twitter feed. I'm not going to show it to you, but I'm going to let you know what I said back. Let me see if I can get to my thing here. Get to my stuff here. Where's my thing? I'm trying to find my homepage here. I'm on the computer, not on my Twitter. So where am I? Profile. Here we go. Okay, so if you don't know, I have a Twitter feed. It's just my name, Chip Barnes. And I have that list of people I told you about that are pinned at the top. But somebody had said, oh, maybe it was a response to them. See if I can find it. Well, let me summarize. So it went kind of like this. So, you gave me those 3 things. Let me give you 3 things you have to acknowledge or condemn. So do you condemn the occupation and the blockade of Gaza and of the West Bank? Do you acknowledge the Nakba in 1948 when the state of Israel was formed? Do you acknowledge the mistreatment of Palestinians in the West Bank, including having to, the apartheid nature, having to have separate roads, separate license plates, home demolitions, forcible relocations, those things? So if you agree to condemn all those things, I'll talk about condemning your things if you want, but let's flip the script, right? So what's good for the goose is good for the gander. So that kind of stuff. So if you follow my Twitter, which I hope you will, you'll see information like that. I don't know if I can get away with doing that here on a post or not, but I don't want to find out the hard way. And by the way, there's some really, really, really good people on Twitter that are advocates for this issue and many other issues. Now, there's some, people that advocate on the other side that are a complete pain in the ass, that many of whom I've blocked just because I can't take their relentless propaganda. But you can do that just like you can here. So that's a suggestion. We did have somebody in the guest queue. Let me see if they're still here. Nope, they dropped. So if anybody wants to come up and talk, if you have somebody, if there is somebody on here who supports Israel or who supports what's going on right now in Gaza, and you want to put up some counter arguments, I'm happy to have you come up. I won't talk down to you. I won't mute you. I'll listen. I'll hear you out, and then I'll hopefully have a chance to reply. But we'll have a civil exchange, which I think is the most important if there's ever going to be peace. So, but yeah, there are a lot of people that I see on TikTok lives, and they create what's called an echo chamber, right? It's this self-reinforcing, confirmation bias type of communication. We could be accused of that here, I guess, to some extent. It's a lot of people who come to my lives or probably agree with my point of view, but it doesn't have to be, right? People are more than welcome to come in, and it's actually more interesting when you have rational and civil exchanges based on points. And I went to the pro-Israel rally, which, why did I go there, right? That sounds crazy. I go there to learn and see what other people think and try to understand other people's points of view, because it helps me to better understand how to respond to those things like we were just talking about, right? In fact, I need to drink some water. Give me a second. So if anybody wants to come up, but, I was thinking today, the amount of misinformation that comes out of the Israeli side is painful. It just makes it hard to take them seriously. So you always get these arguments, well, that's true, that's true. Somebody said this morning, in my Twitter feed, the reason that all these people have been unalived in Gaza is because they're used as human shields, every last one of them. So what the H group does, according to this person's argument, is that they make people stay in place and they make them get hurt. So it makes the Israelis look worse. That's the argument. Now, here's what I said back to that. I said, imagine you're an H group member and you have a secure concrete reinforced tunnel that's 150 to 200 feet below ground that can't be hit. So would you stay up in a building that's 5 or 10 stories high and wait to get blown up by somebody and make the people stay there and you die too? Like, doesn't make any sense. Or would you stay down in your tunnels where you're safe and then you'd come up when you had to fight accordingly? Of course you're going to use the tunnels to your advantage, right? So why in the world would you force people to stay in a building that you're going to unalive yourself in? It doesn't make any sense. So it's just irrational arguments. And the other thing is, with all the buildings that have been destroyed, and by the way, their different leaders have said the purpose is destruction, not accuracy. What does that tell you? And they dropped, I think of all the things that have been dropped, about 40 or 50% have not been guided. So if you don't know, when you drop an unguided munition from an aircraft, it lands where it lands, within a certain radius of where you drop it. So how can you be pinpointing somebody? We just saw in Lebanon, in Beirut, there was a relatively senior member of the H group who was targeted for what they call, assassination. And they fired a Hellfire missile from a drone directly into the second or third story of a building where they had intelligence where he was, and it unalived him. So they have the capability to target their munitions if they so choose, but they're not. But they claim they are, and then they're also claiming they warn people to get out first, which they don't always, they do sometimes. But if you're telling people to get out of a hospital who can't move because they're sick, or you're hitting a school where there's children and people are sheltering in place, it's, hitting those targets are war crimes. Let's face it, right? And there's no proof, no evidence. And talk to Amnesty International. They evaluated all the conflicts going back to year 2000 that have happened in Gaza and the West Bank. There's no evidence of use of human shields. There's no evidence to support those claims. So, does Amnesty International have a reason to lie about that? I don't know. That's when somebody says, this is silly. When I was a kid, my folks said, study is hard so you can be as smart as, that's silly. Come on. But it is good to study, right? And the other thing is, learning in school and passing a test is nothing like learning the real important stuff in life, right? And it's unfortunate in the American educational system, we mostly teach towards teaching to the test, which basically what means is that, there's a standard test for math and for reading capabilities and competency. And everyone teaches to the test, so it makes the school look good and the kids can quote unquote pass. But they don't graduate with any critical thinking skills. They don't graduate with any really good writing skills because they just lower the standards, or they pass people through. It's really sad. And I was asking Liam, who's this professor, Liam O'Mara, that I had on last week. He's a professor of, he's a PhD in Middle Eastern Studies and World History, and very smart guy. Obviously, he's a professor. And I asked him, I said, what are the written skills, writing skills of your students nowadays? He's like, oh, it's so bad because people are used to sending texts, right? They're not used to writing letters or handwritten stuff or even extended emails. So when they have to do a writing project, it's like, they just haven't developed their writing skills. I think one of the things those of us who are a little older are very lucky is that I went to a really good grade school. And so I got taught like, it was like, here's an example. I'll tell you right. So what I learned in English class in third grade at this prep school that I went to, I ended up leaving that school and going to a public school. And in my ninth grade year, your freshman year in high school, we were learning the same things I learned in third grade at this prep school. I'm not kidding, which is really sad, right? So the public school system is actually not bad where I live, but it just goes to show you that, if you have wealthy people or have enough money to pay for private school, it is much better. It's a big leg up. But we were given a lot of practice of writing skills as well as math and stuff. So it's a really good ability. I'm not that good at it, by the way, but it's good to have at least some capability to write something that's concise, which is one of the things I struggle with. I tend to go on and on, but concise and well worded and succinct and articulate. And some people are excellent writers, like people like Chris Hedges. They write books and they write columns and articles, and that hasn't been me so far yet. I'm more of a talker and thinker, but I probably should make myself be disciplined. A lot of people have given me pressure that you need to write a book. There was one person who contacted me, thankfully, that says, hey, I can help you with that. I can help you structure it. I can help you pace it out. So maybe I will do that. I don't know. So we'll see. But if I do it, you have to kind of pick a niche to talk about. And I talk about so many things. So maybe I'll write one on, I don't know, the political process being so messed up. And maybe I'll write one on ecological systems that are out of whack, or maybe I'll write one on the history of civilization. I don't know. There's a lot of people that have done good work, and I don't want to just copy their stuff, but we'll see. Anyway, if anybody wants to say anything, come on up, because yeah, here we go. We got somebody here. Oh, Viv is here. Cool, Viv. Come on up and say hi to the audience.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Hey, can you hear me? Because I've been having a few problems with my mic.
Yeah, for some reason, my phone speakers are not. In other words, the speaker that broadcasts the sound. Normally, you have the speaker by your ear. If you're holding the phone, it keeps reverting back to the ear speaker. So I can hear you, but it's just
Yeah,
not.
that's the same problem I'm having, but it's only on TikTok or if I'm on a live or something like that. It's really weird.
Yeah,
Yes,
I'm gonna keep talking, Viv. I'm gonna grab my earbuds because it circumvents that problem. So please talk. I'll be able to hear.
no worries. Yeah, hi everyone. I just wanted to bring up one argument that we always hear on lives from the Israeli side. When they usually bring up the fact that your phone. Yeah, Esalt, and I think so as well. I actually put on a tracking device on my phone. It's crazy how much tracking is going on, but I suppose it's what's going on as well, Chip. I don't know if you're having those problems as well. So I just wanted to bring up one argument because a lot of people are having this on to Israeli lives where they say that the age group are using human shields. And
Yeah.
I've actually done my research into this, Chip, and it's actually the IDF that does this practice. The whole practice of human shields actually comes from the IDF. And
Yeah,
I've
I've seen
actually
that.
found as well in the Supreme Court in Israel, they actually put a law in for them to stop doing that. So the human shield thing that they say is actually self-projection. And if you guys actually even go onto Wikipedia, there's several issues or several facts where they've done so. I mean, if you
Right.
look in the second intifada between 2000 and 2005, there was a 12-year-old Palestinian boy that was actually chained to an armed vehicle when they were going actually into battle with the
Yeah,
824.
I saw that.
So, the whole thing of human shield, it's actually sickening. And if you actually go in, and I've been doing this when I do go into their lives, I go and listen to all the, all the facts that they say about the age group. And every single time, Chip, it's like I go and I find reports of the IDF doing that, which is crazy. I mean, even when it's coming to the graping that they say, babies doing what they say that the age group has done. Found several instances on their own reports when they're doing that. I mean, there was
Yeah.
a 13-year-old, a 13-year-old girl that was raped by the IDF while she was in prison, and she was actually starved for 5 days, which is
Right.
actually sickening. I mean, and
Yeah.
if you look at as I said, at the hostages, and you can see the way the age group looked at them, and then when you look at the others that were released that were in prison, I mean, action for me speaks louder than words. I believe in what I see than what I hear. So,
Yeah.
it's just crazy that when each time when you ask, sorry, can you give me the proof, you literally get annihilated, and that's very evil to do. But
Yeah.
I just want to say, Chip, keep up the good work, and yeah, I'll definitely be in touch. It's been a crazy 2 weeks. I don't know how your
No
2 weeks
worries.
have been, but
Busy.
yeah, it's been crazy busy. I'm just on my way now to finish something as well. But yeah, it's one of those things. But I just wanted to say, I just wanted to bring up the human shields.
Right.
I think it's something that people should look in, because there's a lot of instances where they've been doing this for years, and I was shocked when I found all the findings, and it's
Yeah.
even in their Supreme Court as well, that they've got the judgments of that. So
Yeah.
I just want to say there's a lot of self-projection that they do, and it's very sad that that's going on. But I just want to say, guys, hope you all have a great evening, Chip, and thank you so much for the knowledge. Always appreciate you, and keep
Sure.
doing what you're doing. Thanks, Chip. Have a great evening. Take care,
Yeah.
guys.
Thank you. You too. Appreciate it. Yeah, it's always nice to hear from Viv. A lot of regulars that come on the show, which I really appreciate. And, it's always nice to see familiar faces or, familiar voices, more likely. I do want to mention something here. This is behind me. This is the march in Washington, D.C. for Gaza. And it's going to be Saturday, January the 13th. And it's going to be at 1 p.m. And it's at what's called the National Mall, which is the center of Washington, D.C., down by where all the political stuff is, Washington Monument, all that stuff like that. So for any of you who can make it, by the way, if anybody needs a place to stay, if you want to come down, I have room for 2 people that you can have my bedroom. I'll sleep on the couch while you're in town. So if that'll help you save money, and I can make sure you get to and from the event. So if there's somebody, a pair of people that want to come down, a couple or a couple friends or whatever, send me an email at chipbarnesonline and at gmail.com. And we'll talk about that. So yeah, I hope you'll be there. I'm going to be there. Also, we're going to be getting some people together potentially. But here's the kicker. If you go to this thing, your phones are not going to work. And if you do use your phone while you're there, I don't know if you know this or not, but there's a thing called a Stingray. And it's a simulated cell phone tower that law enforcement uses that collects all of the phone identification information from anybody who uses their phone, because it mimics a cell tower. So your phone thinks it's connecting to a cell tower, but it's actually connecting to this Stingray device. Everything that passes through the Stingray, it'll still pass you through to the internet, or a phone call, but it's an intermediary, almost like a VPN, that captures all your data. So anything you say, anything you do, or even your phone's unique identifier, which is called an IMEI number, and it tracks a database potentially of who is in the region at that protest. So it creates like a list. Again, just to know that. So I'm not planning on using my phone during that day. I'm not even going to bring it with me because it's not going to work anyway. Once you pass about 250,000 people, you don't get any signal. So the best thing to bring, quite frankly, are radios. If you have just regular old radios, walkie-talkies, you can get them at like any Walmart or Target or whatever. Get some walkie-talkies and keep a frequency and then just switch it. Then you can say, hey, where are you in the crowd? Meet me by this place. But without that, you're not going to be able to communicate, just So also bring a backpack with some water, some milk. Why would I tell you to bring milk, right? Because if you get tear gas, which is very likely sometimes, milk is what when you have pepper spray, tear gas is different than pepper spray. If you get pepper sprayed, you can it defuses the whatever it's called, like the red pepper, whatever the pepper is in there. So it's good to have some of that too, just in case. because there's a chance that if things get wacky, something can happen. Hopefully not, but you never know. Also, you want to let somebody know what you're doing. So if you do get arrested for whatever reason, sometimes people get swept up. You tell them where you are that day and what you're doing. So if you do have to make a phone call, I have one number memorized. I've been through this before. I've been arrested, so I'm just telling you. So that you can call somebody or call a bail bonding company and get out. Because if you don't do that and you don't know a number or you don't know who to contact, you're going to be stuck there if they hold you, if depending on what the charges are. So usually they let you go after 24 hours, but sometimes they don't. So just so you know, depends on what's going on. And then bring a bottle of water or more. Bring like some snacks, bananas, whatever, something non-perishable, because you're not going to be able to buy anything because the stores get wiped out and a lot of the lines are insane. So these are all the things I'll tell you from having been in DC protests for years and years and years. Okay, and the best meetup places are subway stations just outside the metro. Or pick a landmark. Maybe you can go to Starbucks and tell them to kiss your ass or whatever. All right, we have some guests in the queue. And it was Thomas Brousseau, Dami Falastini, and then NR. We're going until 2 p.m., so let's see if we can get everybody in by then. It's pro-Gaza. It's right there on the screen. If you're asking what look, it's right there. March on Washington for Gaza.
Hey, Chip, how you doing?
Good, thanks.
So let me see if I got this right. You were 12 Kilo for 3 years?
Well, 12 Bravo.
Yeah, so you were the tankers.
Why walk when you can ride?
Oh, there you go. Well, my question is what kind of face-to-face experience do you have with radical Islamists?
As far as I know, none.
Well, I have.
I've never knowingly met with somebody who's quote unquote a radical Islamist. Why do
Well,
you ask?
well, I've had a lot of face-to-face interaction. I've arrested them and I've interrogated them.
Okay.
And it's surprising that you support them.
Why do you say that?
Well, I'm saying that because evidently you don't understand radical Islam because you don't have any
First of all,
experience dealing with them.
what makes you think that I don't understand the concept of it just because I haven't dealt with them face to face? Because that's a fair question to ask, right? You're making an assumption.
Well, here's the thing. I see these people saying, well, we really respect your opinion because you served in the army, but in reality, it was for only 3 years in a tanker battalion. No
Okay.
interaction with the enemy face to face whatsoever. That doesn't make you any sort of an expert on
I never
radical
claimed
Islam.
I never claimed to be. When did I ever claim to be an expert on radical Islam?
No, your liberal followers think of you that way.
Well, I think you're making a stretch on that. Let me explain one thing. First of all, I don't support radical anybody, whether it's the Irgun in 1938 or whether it's radical Islam in 2023. Just to be very clear, I'm against any civilians being harmed ever under any circumstances. So to be clear on that, that's my position. You seem to be ascribing to me different things that are not a part of the way I think. I don't know why you're choosing to do that because you're making a lot of assumptions, but I'm willing to hear you out. But so what was your experience in dealing with radical Islam and how is it germane to what you're trying to say to me?
Well, the point is, I don't think you have an understanding because earlier in the chat, you had a hesitation to condemn the H group without
No, no, no,
without
no,
first
no,
requiring a caveat.
no, it wasn't that. No, it wasn't that. In other words, the point I was trying to make in the tweet that I sent out, just to be clear, is that I was saying in many instances, people will put that up as a requirement, as a starting point to initiate any sort of dialogue. And what I was saying is, in fairness to that request on the one side, it's fair. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. Do you condemn the occupation? Do you condemn Israel's, the Nakba that took place and when Israel was established? Because it did have an impact on people. Let's face it, and it wasn't positive. Do you condemn the fact that the Israelis maintain an apartheid system of roads and license plates in the West Bank? Do you condemn the checkpoints and the difficulty people establish, the unaliving and dispossession, the destruction of their homes, destruction of their crops, their wells? It goes on and on and on. It's not fair to ask one person to condemn a certain set of bad behavior and to acknowledge historical inequities when you're not willing to do the same to begin the same conversation. What's good for one is good for the other. That doesn't mean I support the group. I'm just saying you can't have it your way all the time. This isn't Burger King.
Well, you know what? I agree with you on the human suffering. So my first conflict I went to was Bosnia, and the human suffering there was, the civilian suffering was
Yep.
horrendous. And I was part of the invasion and occupation of Iraq in 2003.
Okay.
So yeah, nobody that's not that doesn't have a sick mind would support any sort of civilian or human suffering. But
Yep.
the thing that concerns me is a recent poll that was conducted by an Arabic polling organization
Yep.
found that the vast majority of Palestinians supported what the H group did in Israel.
Why do you think that is, by the way?
Well, in my opinion, there's no excuse for supporting that. None whatsoever.
Well,
It
no,
can
I
be
didn't
a
ask you.
thousand years of
No,
oppression, and
I
there's
didn't ask
no
you that.
excuse
I
for what
no,
atrocities occurred.
I'm not justifying what happened. I'm asking a question. Why do you think that they took that position on that poll? That's what I'm asking you. What do you think's motivating them to say that?
Well, I speak Arabic, and I've read the Quran many times, and I've read the Hadiths. And I
Hmm.
actually studied under Imam Fawad, who was the Islamic minister of all of Iraq, to understand the
Okay.
Sunni perspective. I also
Okay.
studied under a Shia imam to understand the Shia perspective. So I think something that you're missing here is that this hatred towards the Jews, it's not from, it would be there regardless of Israel's actions. It has been there for, 500 years, and it's never
Okay.
going to go away. That is the facts.
Well, hold on. No, wait a second. So we have to look at what happens in terms of behavior, and then there's of course interpretations of what happens. You're giving an interpretation of what you believe is the motivations behind a large group of people, which you're calling certain Muslims that are. And by the way, the Muslims that are inside of Iraq, maybe under this particular leader, are not necessarily the same Muslims that live in Palestine. And to ascribe them all the same belief system is like to say that every single Jewish person worldwide is a hardcore Zionist, which isn't true.
Well, the arguments that groups like H Group puts out are based on Islam. Do you deny that?
Well, put it this way. Remember, conflating the H group as an entity, especially its militant arm, because by the way, I hope you know this, most of H group is administrative because it runs a government. But because half the people that were not even alive when the H group came to power in 2006, they had no say in the matter. And many people who did not vote for or support H group, same thing. There are plenty of people in Palestine. In fact, the way that H group runs their show is difficult for many people because they're not exactly cupcakes in terms of how they manage stuff. But let me get to your point. I think you're saying that because of a core belief system, that therefore people, when they say they're supporting what happened on the 7th, they ascribe to that same belief. Let me give you a counter argument on that, okay? Now, there may be people, I can't deny that support their vision, or whatever that may be. Now, my understanding is that our initial charter in 2008, when they first authored it, said that they wanted to unalive all Jewish people up into the Mediterranean Sea. They wanted them out and they wanted them ended, okay? Reprehensible. No excuse, no support. First of all, I don't even support the group. I'm one of the people that don't support them. However, let me put it in a different framing. Okay, you're claiming that no matter what goes on, 1,000 years or otherwise, nothing can substantiate what happened on the 7th. That's an argument. That's a point of view. Let me give you a counter argument to that and give you a framing that may be a little different. Let's assume for a second that your assignment of hatred towards Jewish people is not universal as you claim it is. That in fact that there is no hatred per se that motivates the behavior among the majority of the people. Are there some that may? Yes, I can't say for sure because there's extremists in every group, right? We know that from life. But the lion's share of people in any society are not radicals. You know that from your own life. How many people do you know in your circle of friends or your community that are radicals? Not many, right? If any. So may there be some that are more radical in a Muslim or Islamic community because of the belief in their maybe a broader caliphate, or they want Islam to be more broadly adopted? Possibly on a percentage basis. But it's not a large enough percentage to assign a single set of beliefs to an entire group. Let me finish one more thing. In terms of supporting what happened, support for a resistance to an occupation and a blockade that's been going on and making life very difficult for people for many decades is not necessarily saying we support these specific actions against civilians. It's saying we support the concept of resisting, because look what's happened since then. Yes, it was horrible, but look what has changed politically as far as the awareness of the issue, and what those dynamics have changed entirely. Now, the response has been horrific, and a lot of people have had to sacrifice their lives in exchange for that. But the Palestinians are in a long, ongoing struggle for autonomy and self-determination. Just like, are you from the United States?
Yes.
Okay, one more point, and I'll shut up and let you talk. Now, are you in favor of the fact that the U.S. the colonists overcame the British occupation in the United States? Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Well, evidently it turned out to be a good thing.
Okay, so we support the resistance to occupation when we are the beneficiaries of that change, right? So we got our independence by virtue of resisting a brutal and ongoing occupation by the British, where the colonists were being oppressed. You may not be aware of this fact, but the US patriots, that we call them, the freedom fighters, they did some pretty dastardly things to the British in order to gain their freedom, including going into homes that were taken from their families by the British and occupied by family members and property and of course livestock. And the Americans would go in order to try to disrupt the British occupation, and they would unalive anything that moved. And they did it hundreds of times. Now, that's considered, what do you think the British called that? You guys are terrorists. And they also fought very unconventionally. They would stand behind trees and fire at the British, and they'd run somewhere and hide, which allowed them to stay alive and fight for another day. They called them cowards for doing that, cowardly tactics. So unconventional tactics combined with, harsh other tactics that are unforgivable, right? But they're part of a broader struggle in resistance. Now, should we condemn the United States because our resistance group was able to overcome an occupation, or can we understand the behavior within a broader context, as horrible as it was?
We should always condemn atrocities on civilian women and children from any
Okay,
side. But
fair enough.
you made an interesting, valid point.
Well, hold on,
The
hold on, before we go, in terms of what I just said, can you see why the perspective of a behavioral act in terms of its resistance quality can be viewed differently from the group that's resisting versus the one who's being resisted against?
Well, it depends on the level of brutality used.
Well, is it brutal for the American colonists to unalive, let's say, 16 people in a house that are all civilians and some are young kids and children and babies, and they did it 100 times? Is that considered less brutal or more brutal than what we saw on the 7th?
No, it's the same,
Okay,
and they're
well
both
then
and they're
it's
and both any atrocity against civilians should be something that should be absolutely
I
condemned one
I agree
thousand
wholeheartedly.
percent.
I agree. There can be an and, by the way. It's not but. It can be an and. So in the U.S. example, they did horrible things, and we gained our independence eventually because of the problems it caused and because it instigated change. So it can be condemnable in terms of the actions and tactics, but the outcome can be one that's a broader good based on that. And that's all I'm saying in the U.S. That's what was achieved here, and that's what the Palestinians are hoping to achieve for their autonomy and get out from underneath occupation.
I would like to say at the beginning of your
Hold
comments,
on, hold on, hold on. I'm asking you if you can acknowledge the similarities between the differentiation of those 2 points.
there's no justification whatsoever for unaliving women and children, ever.
I'm I'm
That's
not
my
I'm not
answer.
saying there were. I agree with you there, but
Regardless,
I'm
well,
asking you. Well, no, but I'm asking
regardless
you.
of who does it.
No,
If
hold
someone in the U.S. does,
hold on, hold on. I have to be able to get this out. We didn't cover the full totality of what I said. You're saying about one thing which I happen to agree with you on. But I'm asking you within the context of the broader resistance struggle, do you understand the similarities between what the colonists did in order to try to disrupt the occupation and to create a new set of framework that they could live in liberty with what's happening in Palestine? Do you see no relationship between the two, or do you see there's a similarity? I'm asking you to answer that question. I'm sorry. I think you're ready to come on back now if you want to.
there you go.
There you
I
go. Sorry about that.
guess what you're saying is the ends justify the means.
Well, I mean, look what happened with the American patriots. You're saying you're glad that the British occupation ended so we could have our freedom. Why is it different for a Palestinian group? They both used atrocious tactics, But on the one hand, you're saying it's condemnable outright with no other conversation or acknowledgement, but on the other, you're happy. I don't understand how you can't see both.
No, I do see both and I condemn both. Absolutely. It's never
But
justified.
but but is the fact that it was used as a tactic to successfully overcome occupation understandable in that context, even though we can abhor the actual tactics and strategy?
No, I'll never agree with that as a tactic. But can I say
Okay.
something that I agree
Yeah,
with you
please.
on what you
Please
started
do. Yeah,
with?
please do.
Okay, when you said that the vast majority, um, they don't, they're not radical, and that's true. I've been to 13 different countries, and one thing that I have noticed worldwide is that yes, the vast majority of humans worldwide, their main concern is their family, making a living, having a place to live. So
Right.
with that, you're absolutely right. It's just a small percentage of
Hmm.
the radical ones that are willing to do such atrocious things. But the thing, I go back to the thing that really disturbs me is the recent poll that supports an organization like H Group.
I don't think you're understanding the difference between the action that was taken on the 7th in terms of the nature of it being a resistance and specifically what was done within the action. You're saying from your point of view, which is understandable, you condemn every single action that would ever be taken that involves the harming of civilians. And so therefore nothing else matters. Doesn't matter about the context. What I'm arguing is as a juxtaposition to that point of view is while I can condemn the actions that happened in which civilians were harmed. And by the way, there's a lot of conjecture and confusion as to how many and by whom, given what the military response was. We don't know the exact of that. And there's been a lot of atrocity propaganda from the Israelis that has no supporting evidence. Let's be clear about that too. Having said that, there probably was some things that went on that were horrific. Same thing in the US colonies. The people who support Hamas, I would imagine, are doing so not because they support Hamas, they're supporting the resistance component rather than sitting back and doing nothing after having tried for decades through peaceful means to achieve change. That's
Well, and I'll go back to my original argument before I let you go on to someone else.
well, yeah.
Is
It's got to be short. It's got to be short too, because
it'll
we've
be
been talking
short.
for
It'll
quite
be
a while.
short.
Okay.
So,
Yep.
so the initial argument I had was the the hatred for Jews, and I've been to Qatar, I've been to Iraq, I've been to Kuwait, and that is one thing. Regardless of if the person would ever become radical or not, that is
Hmm.
one thing that is very, very prevalent in the Arab world, and that can't be denied.
Well, if you look at it, that may be the case. Let me take it offline and finish the conversation. Okay. As far as that can't be denied, if your experience is that you've experienced that racism and hatred outright, I can't deny your experience. I believe that most people looking from the outside in, and by the way, Arab people are not the only people in the world who have ever discriminated against Jewish people. Let's be clear about that. If you look at what happened regarding immigration from Europe, as well as the inability to move to the United States back before the formation of the State of Israel, many Jewish people were kind of shipped off to historic Palestine. Let's be clear about that. So it's not unique to certain groups. I don't know why that is or what drives it because I don't feel that in my heart. But if others do, so be it. But most people see as an overriding factor to that core belief, if it is there, is that they don't like what happened as far as the establishment of the state of Israel and who got marginalized as a part of that. I think most decent people are happy and are down with the idea of there being a protective situation for historically marginalized people, because I'm against the marginalization of Palestinians, as I have been for the marginalization of Jewish people over many, many decades and centuries. I think it's horrible. But there is a but there. When you try to create something that's your safety net for your people, not you yourself, but whomever drove that, like the Zionist movement, it's not fair to take something from somebody else, just like it wasn't fair for what we did in our country. I'm not saying that I don't see both in the same light. It wasn't fair for the US to go across North America and unalive, I don't know how many millions of people, but it was horrific, right? And therefore, we did the same thing that in a much more slower way the Israelis are doing to Palestinians, although they've increased it dramatically over the past about 2 months. So what I'm saying is that people are against the Zionist movement and its negative impact on the indigenous residents of a territory that was basically taken from them for no fault of their own. And the stuff that has happened since then has been so brutal and so oppressive that they're against that behavior. Therefore, they push back and support resisting that. That's how most people feel. They're against Zionism. They don't have a problem with Jewish people residing side by side with Arab Muslims because they did for a long period of time. In fact, they were welcomed into historic Palestine as as immigrants, and they assimilated into the population to some degree. Wasn't perfect. Yes, there were skirmishes and fights and different unalivings, but that happens with all people in all situations. But for the most part, people integrated. There was an administrative authority under Palestine. Golda Meir even said, from 1921 to 1948, I carried a Palestinian passport. I'm a Palestinian. So she identified with the culture and the administrative aspects of Palestinian society, even though it wasn't formalized into a nation state. And therefore, it existed. And it was broken apart and displaced many people, many villages when Israel was established. I'm happy that Jewish people got a homeland to call their own and be safe from oppression. I'm down for that. I'm just not down for the impact that it had on others as being unfair and unjust. That's the only difference. And I think most people see it through that lens. Maybe there are some bigots who take that plus the fact that they don't like Jewish people. I'm not among them, and I condemn that to the extent that that's how they feel. And I don't think the poll of people from Gaza who have been oppressed and blockaded since 2007 are necessarily going after Jewish people as much as those who are maintaining that brutality, which, by the way, is an act of war. Enough said. Okay, I think Danny Falastini was next. We got a lot of people who have come in. I hope that isn't, I wasn't trying to be rude or impolite, but that's the filter through which I see all that. And by the way, just to let you know, it goes both ways. There are plenty of people that live in Israel and elsewhere that don't like Arabs, that discriminate against Arabs, especially Arab Muslims. And a lot of times you have Arabs that are Palestinian or that are Christian, and they get caught up in the same, fervor, which is unfortunate. Many of whom have died inside of Gaza, which is terrible, right? So it's the hatred and bigotry is a two-way street for whatever reason. I don't understand that because I think you should take people on what they do and not who they are, how they're born. They can't control where they're born. It's a lottery ticket, right? But what you do after you're born and what you believe and what you do to others is a whole different story. So, Itamar Ben-Gvir, Benjamin Netanyahu, Bezalel Smotrich, give those guys a purity test and see how they think. They're Jewish supremacists, and they think that Arabs are garbage. That's true. That they've said it publicly. Okay, I think we had the Mahdi, and then Haderik, Nichelle, Zainal, and you. I'll get to everybody. I'll do my best, but it's already close to 2 p.m. I'll go a little bit over if we can.
Hey Chip, how are
Hey,
you?
good.
So I'm listening to your points. I think that it's a very biased opinion, but I would like to ask you
Can you
why,
just before you go there, you say you think it's a very biased opinion. So please
yeah,
explain why you think that.
I think that there is no historical background that back you up from any serious historians, and you're picking a narrative over facts, which is only prolonging the suffering of the Palestinian people.
Well, can you be specific about where? So, for example, in 1948 and before, when the
Yeah,
Israeli state was being discussed and formed, were
yeah,
Arab, Muslims, and Christians displaced from where they had been living for long periods of time, generation after generation? Yes or no?
yes.
Okay, so I got that part of the history right. Okay, now, so what else about the
The
history did I get
action,
wrong
yeah, for
specifically?
sure. All right, so the action,
What else did I get wrong about the history if that one's not wrong?
why they were displaced, for example.
Okay, well that's called an interpretation of events. What happened was
Mm,
700 to 750,000 people who had been living peacefully in that region for a long period of time were
mhm.
forced to move or were unalived if they were resisting to move, right? That happened. So you can justify that saying, I got what I wanted, so it's tough luck. Or you can look at it as, why I didn't do anything wrong. Why did that happen to me?
Well,
Those were
again, so basically you have your why, which is um, n there is numerous documents that deny the peaceful part. There's numerous document that change the
I
reason.
I said there were skirmishes, but it wasn't pervasive and like all out war.
Well, it's not correct because there was a war. Armies did come in, Jordan
Well,
did
I'm no,
did
I'm not
Jordan
talking about.
Jordan
Hold
did
on,
did conquer
Let me,
land.
hold on. You talked about the history, okay? So let's talk about the history. Prior to 1948 and leading up to 1948, there was an all-out conflict, right? Because the state had not forcibly displaced people yet to a large extent. You're telling me I got the history wrong, and then you're fast forwarding to 1948. There was not all-out war prior to the displacement and forcible activity that the Israeli government and Israeli military decided to push back against. The Arab states came in because they thought it was unfair, and I agree with that. I don't like war, but you can't tell me I got the history wrong and then start making up all sorts of other history that doesn't go in line with what actually happened. I'm trying to let you back in here.
I'm saying the history is debatable because if you have your why, so it's up to you to decide. I think the most famous new historian regarding it is Benny Morris, and he is all front about the massacre that happened to the Jews and the massacre the Jews did on the Palestinians. He
Yeah.
is talking about a lot of analyzing happening on both sides. And his conclusion, after going over the archives of the British, of the Ottomans, of the writers from Palestine, after going over the archives of the Palmach, Irgun Haganah, and
Yeah.
Lehi, this is like his live mission. He's saying it clearly. There was no plan to displace Palestinians as a decision prior to 1948. During the war, yeah, there was a decision to transfer and displacement Arabs from Ramallah, Lud, and he also mentioned that big parts of the movement was done due to the promise of the Arab armies, go away for a couple of weeks, we will conquer and clear everything out, and you can come back.
Okay. So let me jump in as a counterpoint. Okay, give me a second to answer that. So listen to President Harry Truman. There's video
Mhm,
of President Harry Truman talking about exactly what you were just talking about. And there was
mhm,
specific discussions around what would
mhm,
be done with the indigenous Arab Muslim population with regard
mhm,
to the possibility of establishing a Jewish state in historic Palestine. It wasn't like,
mhm.
oops, we got to do it. It was discussed in depth. Anybody who claims the contrary, that guy Benny Morris, if he's claiming there wasn't specific conversations around that, that is absurd.
Well, again,
Oh, sorry, that was by accident.
all right.
Oh, sorry, I'm not trying to mute you. I'm just pointing out counterpoints that are historically accurate. You're saying that I don't know the history, and then you're saying things based on Benny Morris's book that's not historically factual. I did turn your microphone back on. I think it's making you wait 13 seconds or something like that. There we go.
Okay, so my name is not on any historic book, and I did not crawl the archives, and I'm quite sure your name is not either. So we can argue about history. If by the end you hold your opinion, I respect it.
No, it's not. No, it's no,
Just
no, no. Whoa. It's not an opinion. There's factual video evidence of President Truman, who was very deeply involved in this discussion regarding the UN and the establishment of the State of Israel, along with the British, because it was a consortium of people that were involved in making this decision because they needed the reinforcement and the support of other nations to establish it, so that there wouldn't be complete chaos when it happened. Type in Harry Truman decisions regarding the State of Israel. You'll see the video. I'm not trying to make stuff up for you.
again, Truman, I don't know where to place him as an historian or as a fact checker for
He's the
me.
president of
So
the United States.
it doesn't give him any legitimate right as an historian, right? So
Hold on. Listen, you don't have to be a historian to point to specific video evidence that occurred during the history that can substantiate or rebuke a claim that somebody's making. You don't have to be a
mhm.
historian to talk about history. Maybe somebody who has studied history has their version of what they want to say, but if they exclude factual evidence and you can provide the factual evidence, it doesn't substantiate the points you're making. I don't understand why you're trying to stand by something that's factually incorrect.
All right. I will try to explain it in my way. I'm here
Okay?
to talk about my personal experience and ideas. If I want to reach out to external sources to validate any of my claims, it's my decision and it's your decision. It's fine. I'm here to speak my mind, the way I see the things, and to move ahead. Arguing about 70 years history.
I'll tell you what, let's bring up the video with Harry Truman right now. I'm not going to let you keep going on this one because you're saying you want to do a different interpretation based on how you understand it. Fair enough. I'm going to show you the evidence of why the way you understand it is incorrect. Okay, that way I
If
don't
you
want to go past
feel
that point.
if you feel this,
Okay, let's get the video up first of all. Okay, President Truman, formation of Israel. This video circulated around the internet for quite some time. So watch this. Ready?
already. Sure. Do you want to share it?
I am. I'm just flipping the camera around so you can see.
Oh,
Wait
I
one second. I got to flip the
I
camera
see
around.
like the ghost of Truman. It's like in and out. You need to
Okay, can you
turn
see? Can you
off.
see him now? Let me turn off
Yeah,
the
can you?
background. Hold on, let me
Yeah,
take the
turn off
background off.
the background. Yeah,
1 second.
it seems
Effects.
like a ghost version of him. All right, and now it's look good. Thank you.
People in the country, even among the Jews, the Zionists particularly, who were against anything that was to be done if they couldn't have the whole of Palestine and everything handed to them on silver plate so they wouldn't have to do anything.
Mm-hmm.
It couldn't be done. You have to take it in small doses. You can't move 5 or 6 million people out of the country and fill it up with 5 or 6 million more and expect both sets of them to be pleased. We had all sorts of objections to everything that was done. Something had to be done. We went ahead and done it and had it done, and now it's working out. Eventually, I think we'll have them all satisfied. But it's going to take a great deal of time yet to get the job done.
Okay, so what he's referring to there is that he knew that there was going to be a requirement to move a lot of people and that both sides
Mm-hmm.
didn't want either to happen. So to say there was no discussion about what was going to happen with the relocation of people is just not accurate.
So
I had
we
surveys made
okay.
in this part of the world.
You're saying from Benny Morris's recount, there was no intention of moving anybody who was Arab or Muslim from their land. And it was only when the war initiated that any of that stuff happened because Israel, quote, won the war and therefore people fled. That's the narrative I usually hear. What happened was, both before
Mm-hmm.
the establishment of Israel in 1948 and after the war and during the war, there was massive displacement of people. There was unaliving of people. Their settlements were broken up. Their entire way of life and culture was completely destroyed, and they were made to be refugees in all sorts of places, many of whom went to Gaza. Some went to Lebanon, some went to Syria, some went to Jordan, and some remained between the Jordan River and to the east and where Israel proper's boundaries are set up based on 1948. That's what happened.
Okay, it is all right. Let's say it's happened, and let's say that I can justify why the Arab nation attacked. I know they felt this land belonged to them. I can understand that, right? It's fine. Displacement happened, and displacement happened in many parts of the world, right? During the 40s and 50s, there were, I think, 64 million refugees running around. Okay, many refugees happened. I don't see anything special about the Palestinian because they were sworn enemy of the Jews and they wanted to attack by all costs and get everything. So
No, not
far,
true. Not true. Hold on, hold on. Whoa, 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 whoa.
okay.
Slow down. Slow your roll. Okay. You're assigning motivations and thought processes to a group of people that don't exist. So let's look what happened, not what you think was the motivating factor behind what has since shaped what's going on. From 1921 to 1948, there were people living in that region that initially it was a very small Jewish population. But after the goal to establish a historical Jewish state in historical Palestine, which was led by Theodor Herzl and eventually Chaim Weizmann, that carried it through, that then dealt with Lord Rothschild and the British to lobby and create the idea and create momentum behind a Jewish state, many things started to happen in that goal. The Irgun was formed by David Ben Gurion that started to use terror tactics to try to get the British to get the hell out and to forcibly displace Palestinians, to terrorize them to move, as far as creating a
Mhm.
space for the territory. Just let me finish and then I'll let you back on. Now, you talked about this fact that there's this abject hatred that is in the minds of Palestinians towards Jewish people. That didn't exist in 1947, 1946, 1945. Didn't exist. They welcomed people as immigrants into the territory and assimilated people into the communities. There wasn't massive like civil war and fighting going on. There were some massacres that took place based on different things that happened, but it wasn't broad and pervasive throughout the entire region. Now, I'm going to read you a quick list here on my Twitter of the massacres that did take place by Israelis since 1948, and see how you feel about this, because you're talking about Palestinians hating Jews, which I wholeheartedly reject. They hate the fact that they were displaced by the establishment of the state and those hardcore Zionists who led the effort to expel them, unalive them, destroy their communities, and create refugee status out of them. That's what they hate. And that's why they don't like Zionism. Not because it had the goal of creating a safe place for Jews. It was because of the impact that the creation of the safe place for Jews had on them. That's it. So that's the original problem that drives everything we're seeing. And then, of course, Israel's done a lot of things subsequent to that. I won't even go to 1967 yet, which is another big chapter. But let's go back to a list of atrocities. So the Deir Yassin massacre in 948, led by Menachem Begin, a future prime minister. The Abu Shusa massacre in 1948, done by the Gaddafi Brigade. The Tantor massacre in May of 1948. The Lida massacre of 1948. The Salina massacre of October 1948. El Dawima massacre in 1948. Kiba massacre in 1953. Kafr Qasem massacre in 1956. Khan Yunis massacre in 1956. So these are things that have happened. And you talk about the fact that Palestinians hate Jewish people. That's your line, okay? But what the evidence indicates is that a very rogue group of hardcore Zionists, after they won the war in 1948, started doing what they wanted to others en masse, trying to further displace them from territory, unalive them. That is historically fact. No one denies that. So if you're going to try to paint this picture of who hates whom, the evidence would point to the fact that the Israeli hardcore people, not that everybody who's Israeli hates Arabs, but there was a subset of aggressive people who were Zionists who did want to forcibly displace Arabs, and they chose to do so, and they did it with lots of atrocities. Let me let you back in to see what you have to say to that. I don't care what Benny Morris says, because if he's denying that, he's not telling the truth.
Okay. So in general lines, you are here to give the Palestinian case for getting a state or something.
I just told you, you said I didn't know the history. I'm
You
sharing
don't
with
know
you
the history
historical
for.
facts. You're
All
saying,
right,
listen,
so
I just reeled off legitimate historical facts of what happened post 1948. I'll continue. Ready for more? So the Sabra and Shatila massacre in a refugee camp in West Beirut, 3,000 slaughtered by the Minister of Defense, Ariel Sharon, who later became the prime minister. That happened. Okay, the Al-Aqsa massacre in 1990, the Abrahimi Mosque massacre in 1994, Jenin refugee camp massacre 2002, Gaza massacre 2008, Gaza massacre 2012, Gaza massacre 2014, Gaza massacre 2018, Gaza massacre 2021, and the current Gaza massacre that's going on right now. That's the litany of what happened. So if you want to look another way and say it didn't happen, you're not being factually accurate. I'm not taking the side of Palestinians. As I say always, let me finish this one point. This is really important for you to understand. You say that I have a biased point of view. Let me just share with you why I disagree with you, and I'll let you say whatever you want. I'll shut up. If the same thing happened in 1948, but it was an Arab state that was formed, the British permitted the indigenous Arab population to forcibly create a boundary that displaced thousands and hundreds of thousands of Jewish people that now are scattered to the wind like refugees, much of which has happened historically to Jewish people. I'm not denying any of that. And I'm not for that because I don't think anything's wrong or anything. I don't have a problem with Jewish people or anybody for that matter. If the same process had happened subsequent to that, there was massacres by Arabs against Jews, and they've been displaced. And then this next war happens in 1967, where they go and take over all the territory they claimed because it was a preemptive war where they suspected the enemy was going to attack them. So they offensively moved in preemptively, just like the U.S. did in Iraq, based on a dubious claim of WMD, right? So therefore, during the occupation of that land that everyone else recognizes as traditional Palestinian territory, only Israel claims they own it because they won the war that was an offensive war that was illegal according to international law. So therefore, there's an occupation. They occupied part of northern Gaza until 2005 from 1973 with settlements that were later disbanded and pulled out of Gaza. It was a removal of territory they had stolen, not giving back to somebody. If I take your car and I use it for 10 years and I bring it back, am I giving your car back? No, I stole your car and I'm returning a stolen thing. So there's that fact. And that's, I think, reasonable to talk about. Now, in terms of the overall picture, look at all the damage that Israel has done to Palestinians over the years. Look at the body counts. Look at just what happens in the West Bank right now with settlers pushing in and basically going wild and doing all sorts of harm. It just goes on and on and on. And you're telling me that I'm biased. If it was a Jewish population enduring the same thing that the population of Palestinians were, including the hardcore resistance elements of using unconventional tactics of, boom boom busing, boom boom cafes, I wouldn't approve of it, but I would understand it as legitimate resistance by the Jewish fighters. What happened in the Warsaw Ghetto? Jewish people were being ruthlessly oppressed and pushed into smaller and smaller, horrible living conditions by the Third Reich during World War II or pre-World War II. And what did they do? Some militant members fought back. There was an uprising. Now, is that wrong if they used unconventional tactics to rise up against the German oppressors? You'd say probably not. Those people are to be lauded as heroes. Well, how's it any different if the people who are being oppressed in Palestine by a military force and a blockade try to do the same with whatever tactics they use, as abhorrent as they may be? So let's talk our way through that for a second, and I'll just shut up and listen to you.
So how long am I going to talk now before you cut my
I'm
mic again?
going to let you talk as long as you want for the next 3 minutes.
3 minutes? All right,
Yep.
sure. Let's just review it. So first of all, regarding the massacres, 1920, 1921, if we calculate the massacres, it's 100 Jewish versus 21 Arabs. Then we look at the Arab revolt that had to be the British called in support from Egypt to remove it. This revolt also canceled a lot of the promises done to the Arabs, as also many Arabs from Israel also assisted the Ottoman. That's why they lost a lot of land and agreement prior to that period. Only the Saad family and the Hashemite pretty much helped the British against the Ottomans, so that's why they got Jordan and Saudi Arabia. And then the Civil War, you can call it Civil War, you can call it the Independence War, you decide on which side you want to take. We're talking about roughly 1% of the Jewish population versus the entire armies and Arabs, and the clearing of land, or the offer that was made by the UN and was denied by the Arab nation and denied by the Arabs of Israel, you can call it like that. 100,000 Arabs did agree to live under Israel occupation. Today, they are fully Israeli citizens. They're living here. There are 2.1 million Muslims. It's a growing population. We cannot find any comparison to a Christian population or to a Jewish population in any Arab country. Now, if you don't want to read the Hadith, the Quran, Islam, talk to any Imam and ask them what they think about the Jews and what is the ruling thought around Muslims around the world, 57 countries. You can call it the UN bloc against the Jews. 121 resolution. So far, it's against the Jews completely. Now, if you want to avoid all of that, and you want to avoid the tribal culture, which is the de facto how Muslims ruling their nations so far, or they either have a civil war between the tribes or they have a dictator, and you want to overlook all of those points that are there explaining the cataclysmic failure of Muslim countries around the world and the failure for the Palestinian here, because they are tribes, they must have an external enemy to define themselves. Their definition is external enemy. Internally, in Ramallah, you cannot marry
Okay.
anyone from Shechem.
I was just to let you know. Okay, so that was 3 minutes, and I appreciate your points. By the way, your points are well taken. There's a lot of pushback, and there are some legitimate points that you made, which there's no refuting some of the points you made because they're legitimate if they're part of the real history that happened. The broader point and the more impactful points regarding the history are what happened during 1948 to 1967 and from 1967 to present. Those are the really, really, really big things. As far as the peace accords go, and this is a common misperception in Israel and among people who support Zionism and the state of Israel. If you read Dr. Norman Finkelstein's work, he painstakingly dissects each and every peace accord that was ever put forth and negotiated. In fact, Yitzhak Rabin had the closest one that might have gone through, but of course we know what happened. So every single peace accord, no matter what the Israelis claimed was offered to the Palestinians, or quote unquote the Arabs, which by the way I think is a pejorative, just like you say you don't want people saying the Jews. Okay, these are Palestinians that are Arab Muslims and some Arab Christians, to be fair. Okay, and not all of them feel the same way. They're not homogeneous society. You're claiming that there's historic enemies that they have to put forth to blame everybody because they can't get their shit together, is basically what you said. So my point to you is that not everybody in the Arab world, quote unquote, which is a little bit of an obtuse statement of itself, hate Jewish people. They don't. And the Arab people who assimilated into Israeli culture, ask them how they feel about how they're treated in Israel. And yes, there are some people that have risen through the ranks into the legislature, the Knesset, that are full function. There's some judges that have been appointed. There are some that have navigated through society, but for the most part, most Arabs, just like in my country, there are some people that are black that have been able to navigate through the system and have positions of power. But just because one person served as a Secretary of Defense doesn't mean that most millions and millions of people who happen to be black in our country aren't marginalized. Same way in Israel. They don't get equal treatment under the law. They get given formally the same laws apply, but in terms of application, they don't. So poll 1,000 people in Israel who are Arab and ask them how they feel. And you're going to get 99% agreeing with what I just said. It's the way it is. I know that in terms of the written law, it's not that way. But in terms of the application, that's the way it is. And there are rules in Israel that restrict certain things. There's no gay marriage in Israel, for example. Claim to be the rainbow folks and all this great stuff, but you can't marry another man in Israel. You can't do it. You can have the marriage respected if you get married outside of Israel and move into Israel, right? So it's not perfect. So anyway, the point I'm trying to make is that to look away from the biggest element of all the stuff we're talking about, yeah, where there's some massacres that happen back and forth, yes, but historically, way more Palestinians were unalived than Jewish people as a part of these massacres. And you say that I'm biased. I don't know anybody from Palestine. I don't know anybody from Israel. But my point to you is this. I'm advocating for the behavior and who's been subjected to the behavior, not the party specifically. So like I said, if the roles were reversed and the exact same behavior had taken place over the last 75 years, I have the same exact thing to say, except for I'd be advocating for marginalized Jewish people rather than the Arab oppressor. It's the same thing. I don't care who the person is. I care about the behavior. Now, as far as everybody hating Jews, which is the common thing that just to paint the whole thing and therefore everyone's marginalized, there can be no more discussion. That is bullshit. That is deflecting away from these legitimate points that are valid points to raise. Here's my question to you. Would you want to have your family ripped up and some get unalived and forced to go somewhere else against your will for something you didn't do? I think no one would say yes to that, right? I wouldn't want that to happen to me. Why is that okay? Just because there was a British establishment that agreed to it and it was lobbied for with money from the Rothschild family, and therefore people won and others lost big time. Why don't they have a right to be angry? They still have the keys to the very houses they were kicked out of that other people live in. Golda Meir, when she was prime minister and afterwards, she lived in a stolen Palestinian Arab home. That's the truth. So she said she was Palestinian too, so you can't negate the fact that the territory had an assignment and had administration and had an existence and had recognition from the international community, and it's on all the historical maps. So you can't negate that. And Israel is not the border from the Jordan River to the sea. It's not. It claims to be. And all the maps in Israel, if you go on a bus, it's going to show a map of all that, but that is bullshit. The whole world says no, and Israel says yes. Why does the whole world say no? Because they hate Jews? Nope. They don't like Zionism and its expansion, colonial settler, political atheist, land-grabbing mentality that wraps itself in Judaism and tries to use hatred of Jews as an excuse to perpetrate its crimes. That's it. So the idea that everybody hates Jews is a garbage reason. They don't like the behavior of the hardcore Zionist movement. And I realize that a lot of people who are Jewish and Israeli don't agree with it either. So it's not a homogeneous society, just like the Arab population in Gaza and in the West Bank aren't the same either. They're different people, have different beliefs, and some are more militant than others. So that's the deal. Okay, I'm going to close out with that. I appreciate you coming on sharing your points because it's fun to have these conversations. And again, it's okay to have a different interpretation. Okay, if you look at it from a one-sided point of view of who benefits, yeah, the Israelis and the state of Israel benefited greatly from what happened. And they have the support of the US, and they're continuing to do what they want to do vis-a-vis their objectives and aims. And other people on the other side of that are getting subjected to those endeavors in a really horrific way. And the good news is that people are finally waking up to the reality of this plight where it was been ignored or under the table for so many decades and gotten one-sided media coverage that was all pro-Israel based on some of the things. This guy, Benny Morris, who wrote this book, I could write a fiction novel about, promoting the Israeli point of view and skip all the stuff that I've pointed out today and make it sound very plausible that they're in the right. but it skips the broader context. And you have to be fair in life. You have to talk about A and B, not just A, right? So I'm not pro-Palestinian. I have no dog in the fight. I have no benefit of either one. I just don't like people that are subjected to harm. You made a good point earlier. You said it's not historically unique that this kind of thing happened. I agree with you. It happened in my country, it's happened elsewhere, but in no instance does it make it right. And therefore, people have a legitimate concern, a legitimate grievance with what happens when it happens to them, right? As it would if it were you. So be fair. If you were on the losing end of the same deal you're saying is legitimized by whatever you're putting out there, would you be okay with it? I wouldn't be. All right. That's what I'm saying. All right. We got Haterick, Michelle, and Manir, and then we got to stop because I can't go on forever.
Hi, good evening, or
Hi.
is it afternoon where you guys are? I
It
mean,
is. Yeah. Are you in the UK?
yeah, I'm in the UK. No, I just wanted to
Yeah.
quickly sort of just clear up this idea that one of the gentlemen just before Mahadi that actually came up, and he was trying to make a point that there was hostility towards Israelis. Well,
towards Jews.
towards Jewish people, right? I mean, it's because they're part of the problem. They've actually tried and conflate the two with, Zionism and Judaism as almost as interchangeable, and the two and one are the same thing. Zionism, when it was created and had the grand meeting in Basel, which was in Switzerland, this is when we see the formation of the flag, and it did symbolize the River Nile to the Euphrates. And up until very recently, it was still considered a conspiracy theory for anybody to mention or say such a thing.
Right. The greater Israel map. Yeah.
Yeah, the Greater Israel map. I mean, there's Daniela Weiss, who I believe is one of the members of the current Likud party within the Knesset, and she's head and in charge of the illegal settlements. She's somebody who's pushing for the illegal settlements to be built.
Right.
And she's openly spoken about the River Nile and the Euphrates. I mean, going back to 1982, there's the Oded Yinon plan, which I think you can look it up. It's known as the Greater Israel Project, Plan for the Middle East.
Yep.
That's an official document, so it's not even come from a Muslim or an Arab source or a Middle Eastern source other than Israel themselves. It's come out of their Knesset. And they actually address this as being whereby they want to take a big section of Turkey. They want to take a part of Syria. They want to take Iraq.
Yeah. Let me pull it up. I've done many videos on this, but I'll pull it up on my map so people can see it.
Sure.
Please go ahead. I'll show you. You're talking through it all.
I mean, it's interesting. The plan was formulated in 1982, and it was the same year that Vanunu exposed the fact, who was a journalist, a Christian Israeli journalist who's in prison to this day, for simply reporting on the fact that Israel has managed to enrich uranium to develop nuclear warheads, which this year became apparent back in October when one of the members of the Knesset spoke about using a nuclear weapon. The biggest threat to peace within the Middle East is Israel. It is a hostile country. It's the only country that has a expansionist ideology, as you can clearly see. I mean, this is the Greater Israel Project. I mean, the Oded Yinon plan actually goes beyond that. It actually goes into Iran, Afghanistan, and Pakistan as well. They want to split those countries equally. So little wonder is the hostility towards an Israeli or a Jewish person within the Middle East, because, when you have, this is the only nation, by the way, within that territory, within that region, that has an expansionist ideology. There's nobody else that has that. There's nobody else that has nuclear warheads. And interestingly, Zionism, as far as European Zionism is concerned, started off as a Christian project first. And ultimately, I mean, this is going to be a shock for many people, but Reinhard Heydrich, who was the head of the Schutzstaffel in the Third Reich, the SS, he was the head. He openly said, I am actually a proud Zionist. And then you have the Havar Agreement in the 1940s, I believe, where the Zionists collaborated with the fascists of Germany in World War II.
Right, people don't know that. The Zionist movement, by the way, is not aligned particularly with Judaism or
No,
even ethnically Jewish people in some cases. It's
no.
a political movement to try to create a dominant presence in historic Palestine for the purposes of projecting its desire to have a greater Israel project and own the territory in the broader region they believe is their birthright.
Absolutely correct. So the way things are going, some people are talking about two-state solution, and I'm sorry, but I'll be very sincere.
Never going to happen.
It's never going to happen simply because it's been so long that this has been going on.
Yep.
It's over 100 years. I mean, things weren't exactly, honeybees and, lovely sort of sweet and.
Well, can you tell people why the two-state solution is not likely to happen, or I can do it if you prefer?
I can, yeah, absolutely. I can. The two-state solution, maybe, I don't know, back in the 1940s, it might have been a possibility, but so much has happened. Too many people have been wiped out systematically. Many people have been made homeless. I believe there's over 500 villages that were expunged by the Zionist entity in 1948. So, and two-state, I mean, if this nation wanted a two-state, why is it every single year or every single time there's some sort of military intervention from Israel, their territory expands? They have never wanted peace. And I think the way I look at it now is I think peace is off the table, unfortunately. Because they tried the peaceful protest in 2018, right?
Yeah, one more thing to add to that is if you look at the map of the settlements that have been built by Israel into the West Bank, it is impossible given the territory has been broken up and fragmented to such an extent that there's no contiguous landmass. And the Israelis would have to withdraw somewhere close to 700,000 people. And by the way, many of whom are American Jews who have moved over with very lucrative incentives by the Israeli government. And by the way, just to let you know, this is a side note that is crazy. There are more Zionists in America as part of the evangelical Christian community than there are Jews in the world. And they're the ones who raise money, and it goes directly to arming and going to forcibly put in more settlements. That's where that money goes. It's insane.
Absolutely.
Anyway, so the settlements, that is so contentious. So in a two-state scenario, because the land is so broken up in these little bantustans like in South Africa, they can't return the land in its totality. Then you add in the fact that the one-state solution, if Israel does claim it owns all the land, then they have to provide equality under the law democratically. That would give an Arab majority from a democracy standpoint, which is totally unacceptable. So Netanyahu has bragged publicly that he's done everything he can to thwart the two-state solution over the years. He's very proud of it. So please continue.
No, absolutely. I mean, I find it hugely ironic that a nation of people who suffered in an ethno-religious state have created an ethno-religious state. I just find that as an absurdity. It's, I think, hugely disturbing the direction that this is going in. And I hate to say this, and I don't want this, but I do feel that we are in the very sort of early stages of World War III. Things could very
I agree with you, and it looks like they're trying to forcibly deport Palestinians from Gaza and get them to go to refugee places around the world because they're talking about withholding federal aid now, foreign aid, if people aren't willing to take in refugees to a certain extent, which is pretty scary.
I mean, their plans won't stop on taking over the entirety of the region, especially in Palestine. They have a plan to go beyond that. And they've made it very clear. In fact, Smotrich this year, I believe it was in March or April, where he gave an address and he actually displayed the Greater Israel map. And it was met with a lot of backlash, but the way I see it is that all these things about the Greater Israel Project being a conspiracy theory, I'm sorry, but they're openly talking about it. Then we also know about the Ben Gurion Canal, and that comes more into sort of geopolitics within the Middle Eastern region. It's basically an alternative to the Suez Canal, which is being used. And I do believe this year Egypt is ready to join, if it hasn't already, to join the BRICS economic bloc.
Yeah,
which
there's
is
24 countries that have applied, so you can look it up as far as BRICS applicants, BRICS, BRICS applicants. So, okay, there are a few more people waiting. Thank you for your
sure,
point of view was very well taken. Thank you for contributing. I really appreciate it.
no problem. Thanks for having me.
Yes,
Appreciate it.
absolutely. It was my pleasure. Yeah, it does look bad, right? I mean, the question is who's going to come in next? I think what you're seeing with the assassination of this high-level H group leader in Lebanon, inside of Beirut, which is the capital, which is pretty deep into the country, that was a major act of provocation, and a lot of people looking from the outside in think that the goal of that was to draw in Hezbollah to create a broader conflict and then bring the U.S. in to help back up the very difficult effort that's taking place to move through Gaza, which is incredibly difficult as far as a ground incursion to take out an enemy who has tunnels and knows the terrain really well. It's very difficult. So I think Israel realizes that they're not going to achieve the mission of forcibly expelling the H group without some sort of help, because they're losing a ton of equipment and a ton of people, more so than they're admitting publicly. So follow guys like Scott Ritter, Colonel Douglas McGregor. If you don't know who they are, they're good people to follow for these issues. Speaking of which, I just want to do a quick little roundup before I bring our last couple of guests on here. So for those of you who don't know who the hell I am, there's 400 people here. You're probably like, who's this guy talking smack? My name is Chip Barnes. I'm a former Army officer. I was in a tank in the first Persian Gulf War in 1990. We deployed from Germany, where I was stationed, and we went to Saudi Arabia, and then we moved into Iraq, and then ended up in Kuwait, which was the country that had been occupied by the Iraqi military. So we basically pushed back the Iraqi forces. But it wasn't until 2003 with the WMD situation that the U.S. went in full force up to Baghdad and, of course, deposed Saddam Hussein and did a lot of damage. Of course, we all know the story there. It's horrific. An illegal offensive war based on lies. Just like what happened in 1967 in Israel, where they invaded and occupied the West Bank, the Sinai, and the Golan Heights to the north. And they said it was based upon the preemptive thought that they might be attacked by their enemies, therefore they had to move first. That is called an illegal war of aggression, just like the US's war, okay? And, it's a mess. Empires do this stuff. And Zionists, for whatever reason, like it or hate it, they're doing things that are aggressive and expansionist. You can't argue that. So if you go to my link tree, we mentioned Scott Ritter and Colonel Douglas McGregor. In my bio, there's a thing that says Linktree Chip Barnes. If you click on that, not only can you follow my backup account in case this rug gets pulled out from under me, which has happened 5 times, 4 times. Sorry, 4 times. My lives have been stopped 5 times. You'll see my Twitter account, which is just Chip Barnes. And it has a list. The only reason I mention this is I want to keep you here on TikTok. But if you go there, there's a list of a lot of great people that I've learned about over the years that you can check out. So people like Scott Ritter, Colonel Douglas McGregor, Jackson Hinkle. It goes on and on and on. Just really good people. So check that out. If you go to that link tree, if you just browse down the list, you'll see some stuff. There's some groups that we've created, different social media platforms. And then at the bottom, there's ways to support my work if you want to. I have a Patreon that I'm about ready to put tiers into. And, people like me that are independently minded and that don't have a corporate job and do this full time, we got to survive somehow, right? Everyone's got their expenses. Mine are pretty low, $2,600 a month. I'm 56 years old, which is very low for somebody not married, no kids. So if you do support me, I'm going to cover my bills, and then anything else, I'm going to bring on some staff, try to grow the platform, and maybe even bring on some other people if we can build it enough. So we won't be going to a vacation home. I'm not going to buy a $1 million house somewhere on the beach. That's just not me. So anyway, that's the link tree. My schedule, just for those of you who are here for the first time, my schedule is Monday, Wednesday, Friday from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. here on TikTok. That's Eastern time. And then Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday from 12 noon and usually about 2 p.m. But if we have more guests, I usually go a little longer if I can. So that's me in a nutshell. I'm on the East Coast of the U.S. I learned about this issue, Israel-Palestine, very out of the blue in 1989 when I was in college. One of my classmates gave her senior presentation in our political science class on the First Intifada, which was a big uprising that took place in the occupied territories in Gaza in 1987. And so I didn't know anything about Israel or Gaza Strip, or I didn't know anything. And so, but a thing I did know was just the basics, like Israel was our friend, a safe place for Jewish people, all these bad people, T-words, want to attack them, they hate them, the typical party line. So it just shattered everything I do. And so it just stirred this an interest because I felt so badly for Palestinians. I was like, damn, this is a bad deal. It's not about Palestinians, like I said before to the other person that came on. It's about the oppressed versus the oppressor. And I know what happens elsewhere. People are like, well, why do you focus on this one? Well, all of them should be focused on, but this is the one that I learned about. So that's the reason I put a lot of my energy into this, because I spent a lot of time learning about it, because I felt bad for these people. And I still feel bad. I feel worse than ever because of what's going on now. This is like the worst possible. It's gotten worse over the decades, but this is the worst of the worst it's been. If I'm sure anybody who's Palestinian or follows this knows what's going on there. But the people endure. That's the amazing part, is in the face of absolute oppression and destruction and the G word, they endure. They maintain a good outlook. They love their belief in their religion and their spirituality is unshaken, and they just are resolute. And it's like, if you're someone trying to push somebody off a piece of land, and that they have such a resolution that they're not afraid to die, they're willing to sacrifice for the cause. I mean, that's a tough person to try to get out, right? It's a very stubborn group of people. And that's because what happened to them was wrong. Let's face it, there was a historical injustice that took place in 1948. It's indisputable. Even if you're totally supporting Israel, which I can understand if people take their teams, but you can't deny that's a historical fact. All of the massacres that I reeled off earlier, it's like 12 of them, maybe 15. Those are indisputable. They happened. People laughed about them from the Israeli side. There's a documentary called Tantora, which was one of the villages that got destroyed. And it wasn't like they asked people nicely and they walked out. It was total, destruction and unaliving of people. It was horrific. And they're laughing about it. These are war criminals, basically, right? So there's tons of examples. I like to share some resources with folks. I got you in the queue. I'll be just a second, not too much longer for the guests. But there's some resources I like to share. Repetition is how people learn stuff. So there's a really good documentary I talk about. If you don't know everything about the West Bank, which I didn't know much about, right? There's a great documentary from a young Jewish woman named Anna Baltzer. So people were sharing with her things like what I talk about here on TikTok, and she didn't believe them. She's like, oh, you're brainwashed. That's all pro-Palestinian garbage. Her family was Zionist, and they had brought her up under that thinking process. So they challenged her, hey, go to the West Bank, see for yourself. You can go into Israel. You're Jewish. Just go check it out. And so she did. She went to a city called Ramallah in the West Bank. And she stayed with a Palestinian family for just under 6 months. And what she learned shocked her. It was way worse than what her friends had talked about. And she was like, my goodness, I had no idea. So she came back as a good person would and started talking about it. So she made a documentary kind of sort of outlining the totality of what she learned. It's called Life in Occupied Palestine. And it's free to watch on YouTube. And if you go to my video library, I have tons of videos that repeat this over and over again. But like I said, you can bring a horse to water, but you can't make the horse drink. When you're talking to somebody who's spewing off a lot of stuff that's off the tracks, which happens a lot, unfortunately, the best thing to do is to let them see for themselves, to go look at this, if you can get them to do it. And the way I do it is I refer to a friend. Hey, my friend John, who was brought up a certain way, used to say a lot of the same things that I hear you saying. He had a chance to watch this interesting show called Life in Occupied Palestine by this young Jewish woman, and it completely changed the way he thought about this issue. That's all you got to say. Now, another one you can show people if they want to know more about Gaza is Gaza Fights for Freedom by independent journalist Abby Martin. And she has a YouTube channel called The Empire Files, which is amazing. She's an amazing person. And you can spend a month on her site and not even cover 10% of her content. It's really good stuff. But if you watch Gaza Fights for Freedom, you'll get a much better idea of what life is like under a siege and a blockade inside of a walled-in, micro city. And it's not great, as you might imagine. Over 50% unemployment, very difficult living conditions. Another country decides what you do or don't get. They come in periodically and mow the lawn by bombing your people and bringing the military in to show you who's boss. All because you're firing some homemade bottle rockets across the border. So anyway, I don't want to minimize the danger that Israelis are under from these rocket attacks, but they're very crude, unguided, sort of, don't even have a very big explosive, munition that when they go off. So it's kind of silly. It's like, an unarmed population against a massively armed military. It's absurd. So anyway, I'm against people being oppressed, wherever it may be. And so, yeah, there are other places like the Congo, and there's other places like Yemen. There's other places like what's happening in Ukraine to some degree, and et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, I mean, we're going to talk about all those things eventually, but this is where the focus is right now because of how severe it is. It's just over the top, right? And like I said, I'm not pro-Palestinian. I mean, I think Palestinian people seem to be wonderful from the ones I've met, but I don't have any friends per se. It's just what's happening. It's the behavior, right? Okay, let's bring up the next guest here. We had Dalal and then Nichelle and Munira. And I got to finish up at 3 p.m., so we got 17 minutes. So please take no more than 5 of those. Hello, are you there? Must have stepped away from the phone. All right, let's take her down and we'll bring up. So if you come back on, I'll take you. Let's go to Nichelle and then Manira. Hopefully they can come up okay.
Hey, Chip.
Hey there.
What a day, huh?
Yeah, it's always fun to trek the terrain around these issues.
I've been listening almost the entire time. I'm 50 years old. Cannot tell you how much I appreciate your content. I think it's necessary in this space. I've been watching the comments, um, and I've had a different conversation in my head every time I see another guest come up. But I do want to say this: you've got 378 people in here. Make sure you guys tap the screen. Follow Chip. He's awesome. I've watched his content for a while, but I do want to say so. I'm a Black American in the Bible Belt in Texas, and I mean I've been an activist, for some time. I used to always think to myself, how in the world did something like slavery happen, or the Holocaust, or how did these horrible things happen? How do we get here, right? And I used to think to myself, oh well, if I was a slave like my ancestors, I would revolt, I would do these things. But it's really easy to become complacent, right? And I was even raised around civil activists, so I was dedicated in church by Martin Luther King Sr., by Martin Luther King's father. My mother sang at Martin Luther King's funeral in the choir. So we were raised all around that. My parents went to HBCUs. I always thought that I'd be able to stand up and speak for oppression everywhere. But then you turn around.
Can you just tell the audience what an HBCU
Oh, sorry,
is?
a historically Black college or university. They went to Tuskegee Institute. I was actually born there. Um, but the point that I'm making is I always thought that, if I saw oppression anywhere, I'd stand up, I'd rise up. And sometimes we get complacent. Sometimes we kind of get caught up in our own bubble, and don't see outside of ourselves. And I saw with several of the guests, a lot of the commenters were just kind of going crazy like we all do. Like, how come they can't see it? How come they don't understand? That's why I've encouraged everyone to watch The Occupation of the American Mind, because it just really blew my brain with how ideology gets established. And one thing that's not talked about enough, in my opinion, is Christian Zionism. I saw some people commenting about that. How in the world is it that American Christians, feel this way? So I just want to encourage everybody, no matter what circle you're in, you have a circle of influence. Please use it, even if it's small. We have to be able to reach the demographics that aren't on TikTok, right? Conversations that Chip has, he's able to reach a segment of a population that maybe Gen Z can't, or maybe a millennial can't relate to. That's why when the older gentleman who came on and it was kind of challenging him about, his military record and things like that, it's going to take all of us. It's going to take all of us to kind of combat this. This is ideology. And Chip's right. It's not just about Palestine. It's about the system that allowed all of this to happen, right? And we've all kind of, in our own way, gotten complacent. I always say when we're speaking about anything, tweak it for the audience that you're speaking to. So I'm Gen X. My children are millennial. My mom is a boomer. What I would say to my mom, and how I say something to my mom, say about Palestine, is not the same way I'd say it to my millennial daughter or my millennial kids. And so, Chip, I appreciate you being able to reach across the demographic divides, because it's going to take all of this. The young people are plugged into this. I can't believe I just said that like I'm old. I'm still really cool. But the young people are plugged into this. But we're seeing more and more, my mom's not on TikTok. My mom's not going to get on Facebook, so just make sure that when you these lives are so beneficial, because you can hear people's point of views that you would not have otherwise been exposed to. I've had the pleasure of meeting so many wonderful people on this app. I am going to be trying to do live. I was inspired by you, Chip, by Liam, people doing it. It's like, I'm not really into this, but I'm finding that because all of our people's accounts are getting, banned and taken down and suppressed, it's going to take all of us. So even if
Yeah.
you don't think that you can do something, you can. Don't be afraid to ask questions. I mean, I've had young people who are like, let me show you how to make this and let me show you how to edit a video. It's going to take all of us. And reach out beyond your phone. Reach out to those communities. And yeah, that's it. And the last thing I'll say is I tell my kids all the time, you don't have to change the whole world. You just need to make an impact in your world. And all of our circles are interconnected. So
Sure.
yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for that. This is really well. Good luck with everything. And talking to your mom as well as your kids. That sounds like a fun time.
All right.
Good luck with
Thanks,
that all.
Chip.
Thank you. See you. Yeah, so a couple comments that came through. By the way, I appreciate that person saying the nice words, and thank you for that. It's always nice when people enjoy what you talk about. Um, so I wanted to make a couple comments. So first of all, for those of you who missed part of this, I understand sometimes people come and go. I record all of these lives. They get recorded by TikTok. I download them and then I put them up on my YouTube and my Rumble channels. So if you're curious where you can find that, go into my link tree, which is in my bio. It just says linktree/Chip Barnes. If you click on that, you're going to see everything that I got going on, including my backup account here, which I hope you'll follow that one because people will say to me, hey, where'd you go? I haven't seen you for like a month. The reason is that there's a rug pull. For people that are spreading the truth and talking about what's actually going on, every so often there's like a mass reporting or something that goes on and just boom, just rug pull. I don't even know what's going on. I can't say that for sure. So following somebody's backup account or their other social media is really important because we have to be in more than one place, right? Now, speaking of getting involved, for those of you who want to get involved, like everybody's talking about this, a lot of people are talking about this. We're trying to figure out ways to kind of make this all work. Like what path do we have to take to kind of get past these obstacles? So I have a group that I created. It's through an app called Telegram. And I'm certainly not trying to, I love TikTok. I'm not trying to tell you to go spend your time there. I'm just saying if you want to sign up on my link tree, the same thing I just mentioned, there's a couple different Telegram. One's Palestine in Focus. Another one's called Action for Change, which is the one that she was just referring to. Like if you want to get involved, you can talk to people and figure out what your steps are going to be. So everything helps. And by the way, you may not think of yourself as any special person. I'm not either. I'm just a guy talking to a camera, and I happen to have some background in history and politics, but you have your unique skills that you can offer them. Everyone's got something they can contribute, no matter what it is. So finally, somebody asked about Patreon. If you don't know what that is, it's a way to support independent creators like me. You can become a member. It's either monthly or one time, however you want to do it. I'm getting ready this afternoon, just to let you know, I'm adding some tiers to my Patreon. Now, all of my social media isn't perfectly built out yet. I'm a work in progress. I'm 10 weeks into this. So I'm learning a lot, but I have a website I'm creating, which is going to be chipbarnesonline.com. Keep an eye out for that. That will be on my link tree once I have it set up. And I'll be able to put some content there that I just can't put anywhere else, right? Up to my website. So I can put whatever I want there. I can't put a lot of stuff here or Instagram. Take it down, unfortunately. So, but if you want to donate, there's that. I also have Cash App, Venmo, PayPal, and something called Zelle, which is like a bank-to-bank thing. So if any of those work best for you, people have been amazingly generous. I'm very open-minded, very open. Once my website comes up, just to let you know, all of my donations are going to be posted against all the expenses that I have. So if it's personal expenses, you'll see those. I live a very Spartan life. But if I'm able to hire some people to help me out, which will be great because I'm spending tons of time doing that kind of stuff, making videos and all this, it just takes a lot of time. So I'm trying to get somebody to help me. Maybe I'll hire a subcontractor or whatever, but you'll see what it's going towards. You're never going to wonder what did Chip do with the money, because I think that's terrible. If people donate, you want to know what's going on. So, but anyway, it's in my link tree. All you have to do is go there and click on it. So we have two guests that are remaining here. We have Dalal and Munira. Sorry to make you wait. Let's see what you have to say. What's going on? Are you there, Dalal? Okay. Oh, there she is.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
We appreciated you. Really, I'm new to TikTok, so I try to learn how much I can. I was on Facebook, YouTube, all that. My background, politician, journalist, hotel management, and like I said before, I have the organization help mental illness and homeless. So with the 2 weeks, we will have big, like from Gaza to homeless people. We will feed all the people in St. Louis downtown with the
Nice.
community, with the Pakistani community. They will help me out. We will have a flag and candles night, like dinner for them. And we will see what they will like, how we can help them more
That's
to
great.
get much better. But this is like, Chip, this is big problem for homeless. I will start this, the first thing, my big things, Palestine, but I'm worried about here too. So I think to cut money from here to send to Israel is big mistake. And now Israel, they will take us to another war, to Lebanon and Iran. And this is,
Yep.
if we start with Iran, you know, you've been in military and you know, this is not a stop, maybe take us 8 to 10 years, if not more.
Yep.
And this is with this war, just a few months, I think I don't know the number, how much we spent in Israel. And
Right.
before that, how much we spent in Ukraine. And Ukraine and Israel, I think this is just to help Israeli government. Because look like they work together. And I know from there, they have a lot of Ukraine, go from Ukraine to stay in Israel. And so those people, the innocent people, just the Jew, you move them to be in Palestine to be more count for your government as Israeli, but you put them from a problem to problem. So I don't think so all the government think about how much this be good or bad to the people, how much cost them to move people. And this is all these, I believe this is in United States. We pay more in England, we pay more in French, we pay more in anybody.
Yeah.
I think so far, I don't see this president, he's have budget for people inside. To be healthcare, hello? Hello? Chip? I'm
My
sorry, I
phone
lost
turned
you.
off accidentally. Go ahead,
Hi,
please
how
go
are
ahead.
you? What is his name or she?
It's a she. It's Ruby. She's a 4-year-old coonhound.
Oh,
She's
she's terrible.
good girl.
Hi, how are you? You know, this is remind me how much animals in Gaza. I will send you this video, the animals, how much herd in Gaza too. Not just the people, not
Yeah,
just the kids.
exactly. Yeah,
And
it's horrible.
I feel we need Bush. Like yesterday, I been tell everybody, you know, we been talk, but we need take action. We cannot stop until they keep sending money, and we do have a problem here. We need those homeless have apartment, have room, have, doesn't matter how big the room. Just make sure they sleep in that room. In summertime, very hot. In wintertime, very cold. So at least
Yep.
have a space for them to sleep.
Sure.
Think about their mental illness. Put for like 100 people, one doctor. They
Yeah,
need
it's not
do
good.
something. They need put budget for those people. You
Yeah,
know, another things, you know, I will tell everybody they go to enjoy the military, to go fight for different country. If this is here in United States, I'm the first one go to save United States. If somebody come to do something here, but
right.
I will refuse to send my brother or son or me to defend other country or pay for them. And I see United States, how long EBAC will cover? How much they will cover? I think all this is from our tax. They keep, okay, they control us, EBAC. As politicians, they control the Congress, they control the senator because they pay money.
Yeah.
How you let somebody control your country? American people, you need wake up. Hi, how? Nice. I love that. You have cat and dog. So,
Yep.
Chip, I don't need to take from other people time, but I would like to chat with you and to found opinion to help me with my organization, how I can help other people, how I can push the government, at least in my
Yeah.
city. If we have
Yeah.
program to do, we go to talk with Congress, we talk to the senator, they need to do something. Mayors,
Okay.
everybody.
I'm probably gonna do one of my lives coming up, and I'm in part of my Patreon. I'm gonna have a private group where we can meet and talk about political advocacy. So I want to show
Yes.
people. Thank you for calling me. I really
Thank
appreciate
you.
it. Thank you. Have a great day. I want to show people really quickly. I have to take the dog out for a quick walk. So I just want to show you my link tree so you can see what it looks like. So when you click on that little link in my profile that says Linktree Chip Barnes, this is what comes up. Get cat, go. Sorry about that. My cat got in the way. Not cool, bad timing. That's the link tree right there. So you can see, I'll get a little closer. It's got my TikTok backup account. It's got all the other social media you can see there. And then it's got the different groups I talked about. And then it's got the donation sites. If you can see that, okay. So if you click through to that, please do. If you want to help out, I'd really appreciate it. But lots of good information there, and I hope you'll take advantage of that. I got to take the dog out for a walk while we're talking here. So let me flip the camera back around. Here we go. And so let me see who's next in the queue. We have Woke and Chill, and that's going to be the last guest for today. Hello, are you there? I think they might have disappeared. Yeah, they disappeared. So it's right around 3 o'clock. Yep. Let me do this. Let me take the dog out. I'm going to close down shop here today. So again, my schedule, if you want to watch again, it's Monday, Wednesday, Friday from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. Eastern, and then Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday from 12 noon to 2 p.m. That's Eastern time. And again, thank you, Maz, for moderating, and anyone else who's doing so. I think it was just Maz today, but thank you for your help. And I appreciate your support, everybody. My next live is going to be tomorrow night, Friday night at 8 p.m. Eastern. So I hope I'll see you there. If you didn't catch all this, I'm going to record it, download it. I'm going to download the recording and put it up on my YouTube channel and my Rumble channel as soon as it comes down. So should be sometime within the hour or two. So go check it out if you want to. I got a ton of other lives and other videos on my channel here. So if you're ever curious about issues, scroll through my library. You'll find all sorts of great stuff. And please, please, please repost and comment on people's videos in addition to liking them. It gives them a much bigger reach. We have to get the good content to reach as many people as possible. So thanks for being here, everybody. I really appreciate you. I hope everybody enjoyed it. It was kind of a fun ride, a little bumpy ride today, but we got through it. So I'll see you next time tomorrow night, okay? Thanks, everybody.